What if Bella was Jasper's lost sister? I hate having nightmares. Tonight I was tossing and turning in my bed, trying to wake up from the terrifying vision of Daddy being a bad guy. I knew it was Daddy because he still looked the same. He still had the same hair and face. He was still really tall too. But he was different, because his eyes weren't the warm brown I always loved. His eyes were menacingly red. They reminded me of blood, and they did not have a very nice look to them. He was pale too. Usually Daddy was really tan, because we spent so much time together outside in the sun. He was always helping me learn to ride horses or something. But in this dream, he was paler than the moon. It was scary. What was scarier was that he was fighting with other pale people that had red eyes just like him. I was worried sick, because I felt like he was going to get hurt. And then, just as he was about to bite someone's neck, I started screaming for him. He looked up when he saw me, and then I was woken up by two strong arms and a voice that kept calling my name. Bella, Isabella, you're okay, it was just a dream, sweetheart. Please wake up, Bella. Daddy's here, I heard the voice say. I opened my eyes and Daddy was holding me in bed, trying to send away my scary dream. I quickly hugged him back and started crying. He slowly rocked me back and forth. And then he lifted my face up so I was looking in his eyes. Would you like to tell me what your dream was, sweetheart? I nodded and told him about his scary red eyes and the fight with the other pale people. Oh Bella, it was just a dream. It's okay, I'm here, and I'm never going anywhere. I was 6 years old the night of that dream. Little did I know just how much my world was about to change. My name is Marie Harrison. And I am 17 years old. But I'm not your average 17-year-old girl. My skin is ice cold and whiter than paper. My eyes are a liquidy topaz most of the time, but they darken considerably when I get a little thirsty. I have the power to influence a person's decisions with my mind. I have been pregnant for 141 years, but I have no baby bump. To an outsider, I am constantly considered inhumanly beautiful. That's probably because I'm not human. That's right, I am Marie Harrison, and I am what you would call a vampire. A monster. I try not to be a monster, to not give in to this pathetic excuse for a life I have been cursed to. Most of my kind follow the myth of vampires and drink the blood of humans. But I feed off the blood of animals, and I try my best to keep the humans safe from other monsters like me. I have pretty good control over my bloodlust, and I attend high school every school year posing as a human. I move to small towns every few years or so and start over. Don't ask me what for. Because I couldn't give you an answer. I have no friends, no lovers, and I don't even know where the man is who changed me shortly after impregnating me. I am completely and utterly alone. And I have been since my daddy left for war in 1861. He was in the Confederate Army, and went missing when I was 15. I was only 6 when he left, and he was so much more than just my father. He was my teacher, best friend, protector, and my constant companion. We had such a special bond that I can faintly remember Mama being jealous all those years ago. I can barely remember my mother. She died 2 years after Dad. And I'm surprised she held on that long. She sunk into a deep depression when he died, and that's when I began to take care of myself. When she died of a broken heart, I just remember her telling me she knew I'd be all right without her. Then we held each other quietly as she drew her last shaky breath. I loved my mother, but the pain remembered from her death is nothing compared to the heartbreaking feeling that shoots through my unbeating heart each time I remember my father. I let out a deep sigh as I completed the drive into my newest hometown, Forks, Washington. I found the lonely street where I was renting a small cottage and pulled into the property. It was next to a large forest, and I could already smell the sweet blood of elk, my favorite delicacy. I suddenly felt my stomach flutter, and I knew my precious little fetus was kicking again. The baby that could not be born did this whenever I needed to hunt. I looked in my mirror and the color of my eyes confirmed that I needed blood. I decided to get settled into my new home and then go hunting. It wouldn't take long to unpack, because I only had 2 boxes I felt were worth carting around from home to home. One contained the small amount of clothes I especially enjoyed, and the other was quite a bit dearer to my heart. The second box contained every little trinket, every memory associated with Daddy before he died. Old letters, birthday presents, and even old dresses he used to love me in. They were all carried to each home I traveled to. I couldn't bear to part with them. How could I dishonor his memory like that? I loved my dad. He was the most wonderful man I had ever come across in my 158 years. He was everything to me. He was Jasper Whitlock, and I loved him. After I unpacked my few items and looked around the house, I discovered the small cottage to be to my liking. It was simple but charming. It didn't have a huge amount of furniture, but it would suffice. I didn't need much, and I had a large sum of money tucked away if I felt the need to splurge on anything. I left the house quickly as the burning in my throat became prominent. And I had to admit, it was always fun to explore new territory. As soon as I was out of the door, I let my instincts take over and followed the delicious scent of elk I had smelled earlier. I soon found a group of them and drank them without hesitation. I could practically feel my eyes turning golden again. I was just finishing up the last of the elk when I noticed a new scent. It wasn't a scent that I recognized, but I could tell it was getting closer. So I hid up in a nearby tree until the animal emerged. I felt somewhat silly, hiding from some animal. But I couldn't help but being caught off guard, for it wasn't often I was unable to determine the identity of a scent. I heard a branch crunch underneath the feet of whatever creature was coming towards me, and I focused on the spot I had heard the noise. I froze when I realized what I was seeing. The creature I was hiding from wasn't any animal I could drink from. It was a vampire. I had very rarely run into others of our kind, and I had never been around them in a permanent residence. I carefully examined the vampire. He was hugely tall, scarily muscular, and he wore a goofy grin that took away all frightening pretenses the first two characteristics would lead you to believe. I got the impression that he was a huge teddy bear that would just be the epitome of fun to hang out with. I made sure to hold my breath as I heard him speak. "Rosie, I promise I smelled something, baby." It smelled like another vampire. "It's still here." I watched in terror as a strikingly gorgeous blonde vampire waltzed up behind him. She looked around the area in the forest and turned to the man. "Emmett, I believe you. I smell it too, but they aren't coming out quite yet, wherever they are. We'll just have to tell the others to be on guard." Others? How many were there in this coven? And their eyes are golden like mine, they must be of the same diet. I'll have to investigate further later. Now I just have to them out of here. I quickly decided that they had to leave, and they unsurprisingly followed suit. I didn't take a breath of relief until their scent had completely disappeared, thanking God for my gift of mental manipulation. Fear seized me as soon as I was alone, and I climbed out of the tree. I have apparently been hunting on someone else's territory, and I wasn't sure how forgiving they'd be. Now I'd have to find entire new hunting grounds. I ran home quickly before I had any other encounters with this other coven. But if they had topaz eyes like me, surely they couldn't be that bad. Surely we at least shared the same value of human life. The little voice inside of me argued that I should get to know them, but my better half knew it was best to leave it. It was no use to try and get tangled up in dramatic friendships. All they would end in is disappointment. I'm a monster anyway, no use trying to cover it up by fake friendships. I collapsed onto my floor when I got home, and just rested in the corner of my small residence. I thought about the coven. I thought about starting school tomorrow as a junior at Forks High. I thought about my unborn child, and I rubbed my stomach in grieving adoration. I thought about the villain who did this to me. I thought about the monster that he had made me to match himself. I thought about what my dad would do to him if Daddy were still alive. I sat there, lost in thought of my dad for what seemed like all eternity until it was time to get ready for school the next day. I had already started getting stares as I pulled into the parking lot. Much to my chagrin, I noticed that I had one of the nicest cars here at Forks High. It was rivaled only by a silver Volvo parked a few spots away from mine. I stepped out of my car and took a deep breath, preparing myself for the dreaded stares, hormonal boys, and awkward introductions that make up the first day of any school. I got my confidence together and walked quietly through the school, trying not to draw attention to myself. It didn't take me long to locate the front office, and I got forms to be signed and schedules to follow. I glanced down at the first class on the list, Spanish with Ms. Gomez. I found the class pretty quickly, thanks to my superhuman hearing abilities. I walked in, tried to ignore the gasps that I earned from several members of the male population and the glares from the females in the class, and got the teacher's attention. "Excuse me, Ms. Gomez. I'm Marie Harrison, and I'm new here." I looked at the teacher and tried to evaluate her character. She had dark skin, deep brown eyes, and was slightly overweight. She had a very nurturing aura though. So I liked her. "Oh, Marie, yes. I received an email from the front office that you would be joining us today. You can sit in the empty chair in the back there, by Mike." I turned to look at the spot she was pointing to, and tried not to groan as I saw the classmate who looked all too perky to be sitting by me. I nodded at her and was about to make my way to my seat when I heard her voice again. Marie, are you perhaps related to the Cullens? I shook my head no, and she quickly apologized and let me go to my seat without introducing myself to the class. Though she dropped the issue when I claimed to relation to whoever the Cullens were, I could see her still looking at me suspiciously throughout class. I made a mental note to find out who the Cullens were. That's when I heard the whispers around me. Oh man, she's gotta be one of those Cullens. I'm sure she's taken. Look at that body. She looks just like those sluts Rosalie Hale and Alice Cullen. Same pale skin and freaky gold eyes. She's not even that pretty, and all these guys are drooling over her. It was the same thing I heard at every school except for the comments regarding my resemblance to the Cullens. Pale skin and gold eyes. Did the other coven of vampires also attend school here? I slunk deep into my seat as I considered that possibility. I didn't want to be in anyone's way, and vampires are really the only thing that could put me in any sort of danger. The class passed by quickly enough, after I thwarted the attempts by Mike Newton to ask me out. He seemed like a nice guy, but he never got the hint that I wasn't interested. The bell rung and I went to my next class, Algebra 2 with Mr. Richardson. I walked into the class to get much of the same reaction from my classmates, including the teacher this time. I tried to not let my face escape into a mask of disgust as the male teacher's eyes raked my body over. I knew I was much older than him, but the low level of professionalism disgusted me endlessly. He quickly told me where my seat was, and I sat down at the empty table. A minute or so later, my partner walked in and sat down next to me. I was shocked to find that she was a vampire. I could smell it, and I could tell by her inhuman beauty. She was small, I mean really small. She was the tiniest vampire I had ever come across, and had black hair that she styled into fashionable short spikes. She wore a smile on her face that lit up the entire room and had an excited buzz in her eyes. She was dressed in designer clothing, head to toe. She must be one of the Cullens. My assessment of her character was interrupted when she spoke to me at a vampire pace. Hi, you're Marie, right? Of course you are. I'm Alice Cullen and I have the gift of seeing the future. So I totally saw you coming. There are 7 others of us, 4 of whom go here too. There's Carlisle and Esme. They're married and they act as our parents. Carlisle works at the hospital, and he has amazing control. Really Marie, he's never messed up once. Then there's Emmett and Rose, who are seniors this year. They're married too. Then my mate is Jasper, who is also acting as a senior this year. We're married as well. Then there's Edward, who's in our grade. She said all of this without taking a breath and I tried to process the overwhelming amount of information she had just given me. I know I had accidentally gasped when she said her mate's name was Jasper, and she was looking at me strangely. I ignored the coincidence, and moved on. She didn't seem dangerous, so I tried to make conversation. Yeah, I'm Marie, I said, giving her my fake name. Technically it wasn't a fake name. Marie was my middle name, and Harrison was my mother's maiden name before she married Daddy. Nobody had called me by my real name since he died. Nobody knew that name. I just moved here, and I'm sorry if I've disturbed your hunting grounds. I wasn't aware there were others here. I never would have trespassed if I had known. I scrambled, trying to make peace with this hyperactive pixie of a vampire. She rolled her eyes. Oh, silly, we don't mind. There's plenty of animals for us to share. How many are in your coven? It's just me, my creator, and I no longer travel together. I spared her the gory details of why I actually ran away from my creator. He was a monster, and he cursed me to the same existence. Her eyes got really wide as she realized I live alone, and I looked down in illogical embarrassment. I had nothing to prove to Alice. Why did I care what she thought of my living status? Marie, you live alone. Please come meet my family today after school. I'm sure they'd love a new friend who shares our diet. You can sit with us at lunch today too. I was about to refuse her offer, and then looked at her face. Her bottom lip was puckered out and her eyes were wide and pleading. She looked like a child who just popped their balloon. So I simply nodded to keep from laughing, and she squealed. She went on and on through the entire class about every member of her family, and I tried to pay attention the best I could. It was easy to be with her, despite her talkativeness. I didn't have to say much, just listen. The bell rang, and Alice asked me what class 1 had next. I looked down at my schedule, and it read, English with Ms. Freeman, she squealed again, something that was turning out to be a regular habit of hers. Edward has that class as well. You'll like him. He's single too. She added that last part while winking at me. As soon as she walked away, I panicked. James was the last male vampire I had ever been around. They were so capable of hurting me. I quickly snapped out of it and just decided to try not to draw attention to myself from this Edward guy. Besides, I had my gift whenever I needed it. I usually didn't use it unless it was an absolute emergency, because it really wasn't fair for me to have the advantage over people like that. But I would use it if it were really necessary with Edward. I collected my stuff, my emotions, and took off for third period with a small little pat to my belly, letting me know I wasn't alone. As much as I would have liked to zone out as I drifted to my next class, I had to pay attention to find out where the class was located. Unfortunately, this also meant an encore of all of the comments people thought I couldn't hear. I was just about to give an unnecessary sigh of annoyance when I heard the most beautiful sound my ears had ever known. A laugh. A single laugh, not a crack up or cackle, but kind of a vocal smirk. I briefly looked over my shoulder to detect the source of the fascinating noise. I froze immediately when I saw the miraculous creature, whose face held only the slight trace of a smirk. Most of it was filled with annoyance. Still, it was breathtakingly, heartbreakingly beautiful. I felt my stomach flutter as if I were human, and I couldn't tell if it was from my unborn child or nerves. Standing before me was a tall, well-built, pale-faced man with eyes to match my own golden color. There was no doubt he was a vampire, so he held the usual inhuman beauty of our kind. But his beauty took it to a whole new level. I was about to stop staring as to avoid getting caught, but then I noticed his hair. Oh gosh, Mare, stop freaking out over some guy's hair. You are starting to sound way too much like the teenage girls that surround you. The voice in my head told me to stop, but his hair. It was the most beautiful disarray of bronze my eyes had ever seen. This must be the Edward that Alice was telling me about. Another Cullen. It was then that his eyes met mine and I looked away at inhuman speed and walked into class, trying to avoid his gaze as I knew he walked behind me. As much as I didn't want to embarrass myself further, however, it seemed that Ms. Freeman was determined to bring more awkwardness to my day by sitting me next to him. I took my seat and avoided looking at the man sitting at my right, or at least tried to, as his scent flooded my senses, which of course was irresistible. So you're Marie. Alice texted me about you. Sorry for whatever you had to deal with. She can get a little crazy at times. Or all the time. He paused and rolled his eyes while I turned to him and offered a shy smile. Allow me to formally introduce myself. I'm Edward Cullen. It's very nice to meet you, Marie. We're all excited to have another vampire here, especially one who shares our diet. I sat there for a moment, then realized he was expecting me to say something. Yes, I'm Mare, and don't worry Abu. Alice, she was entertaining at the very least. I'm also looking forward to meeting vampires of my kind. I've never been around others with my diet, but it sounds nice. He nodded. Yes, Alice mentioned you live alone. Please know that our home is open anytime if you feel like being social. Our mother, he put the word in air quotes, is very warm and maternal. She loves meeting new people. We content the conversation for a few more minutes quietly before class was called to order, but spent a good portion of the class rolling our eyes at unintelligent classmates or smiling at a joke one of us had made under our breaths. It was nice to feel at home, like I already had a friend. It had been a very long time since I had any sort of companionship at all. I continued in this thought process until a thought had me frozen. I can't let my guard down. No matter how nice he seems, he is a man. And this time, you're protecting another, not just yourself. I patted my stomach self-consciously and remembered the life inside me. Some would say I was crazy, but I knew the baby was still there. I made up my mind. I would be nice. I would sit with them at lunch. I would meet the family, but I would never let it be anything more. I couldn't do that to little Whitney. I don't know why, but I always felt like the baby was a girl. I picked the name Whitney for my little unborn darling because it reminded me of my real last name. Of Daddy, Whitney Whitlock. I cringed internally at the thought of Daddy. No one would ever know that name. No one else knew she existed, apart from James. Not that he cared. The bell rang before I knew it and it was time for lunch. Edward's voice shook me out of my thoughts. Marie, are you ready to go? I'll show you to the lunchroom. Everyone is excited to meet you. I nodded and smiled, then walked alongside the bronze-haired beauty to the cafeteria. We went through the line, bought our food for the purposes of pretending to eat, and were about to go sit down. Edward insisted on paying for the apple and salad on my tray. I tried to fight him on it, but apparently paying for a woman's food was important to him, even if it was utterly ridiculous because she wouldn't eat it. We walked into the table area of the cafeteria when I saw it. Not it. Him. It couldn't be. I must be low on blood or something. This has to be some cruel joke. I couldn't move any Arthur towards the table Edward was trying to lead me to. Then he looked at us, and we locked into eye contact. I vaguely heard Edward calling my name, but I couldn't respond. There, staring straight at me with a mixture of love and fear, was my father. Daddy, is this really happening? I mean, it can't be him. He's dead, Marie. He's been dead since you were 15. He's long gone. You're going crazy. Snap yourself together. As much as I tried to deny it, I couldn't. My heart was torn. The man standing 10 feet away seemed to be going through the same thing. People were starting to stare, but I didn't bother to pay any attention to any of them. Finally, after what seemed like days, he took a small step towards me. With a quiet and broken voice, he called out a barely audible, yet hopeful sounding, "Bella." I went into shock. Daddy was here. He was alive, somewhat. He was standing right in front of me. He was calling me Bella, a name no one has called me in years. 141 years, to be exact. I finally mustered up the courage and brainpower to respond very faintly. "Daddy," and that was all it took for him to cross the rest of the distance between us, never taking his eyes off of me. Then he too, okayed me in his arms for the first time since I was 6. We embraced and shook and silent sobs racked both of our bodies, though the tears would never be shed. Then he finally pulled back a little to see my face. "Isabella, you're here, you're alive, and you're so grown up now," he said as he stroked my hair. "You've become such a beautiful woman." For the first time, he looked away. He looked at the until he gathered his emotions enough to say, "But Daddy has never stopped loving his little girl." "Oh Dad, I was so afraid when you went missing, and now I can't believe this is happening." He held in his arms for another minute or so until I heard a familiar voice. "Jasper, honey, what's going on?" Alice said, sweetly but a tad impatiently. I smiled to myself. I suppose patience wasn't something she was good at. Dad pulled back to face Alice, who I was beginning to realize was his mate. It was hard to picture him with anyone but Mama, but I liked Alice so far. And I wanted him to be happy. I was glad he had found someone to fill an empty void in his heart. "Alice, though I believe you've already met, I would like to reintroduce you to Bella. My daughter." He looked at me proudly when saying this, while I looked at the rest of the Cullens. Each of them had dropped jaws, eyes darting back and forth from Dad and me. "Bella, daughter." Alice trailed off, and though I didn't know her well, I was assuming that speechlessness was rare for her. Then she squealed, "Here she goes again. Oh my gosh, Bella, Bella. I always knew Jasper had a daughter named Bella because he never stopped looking for you, you know. Although I guess he'll tell you all about that later." "Oh wow, a daughter. Now that I think about it, you guys totally look alike." Something in the face. "I can't believe I didn't see you coming. So Bella, why have you been going by the name Marie?" She said all of this without taking a breath, and if we weren't vampires I would have been seriously worried about her. He looked for me. Dad turned to me when she said this, and stated, "You've gone by your middle name." "Yes," I simply responded. "You've also been using your mother's maiden name." I reused my previous answer. "Yes." "Why is this?" he asked, not angrily, just with curiosity. I sort of adopted the rule that if you weren't there to call me Bella Whitlock, no one else could either. Daddy just smiled sadly at me. He then whispered, "Well, I'm here now, Bella. And I'm going to call you that for the rest of eternity, so you better get used to answering to it again." Eternity. What a nice word it was becoming. Getting to spend eternity with Daddy. Making up for lost time. What could be better? I could definitely get used to being Bella again. Before I could continue with this thought process, the vampire IA's sum to be Emmett cut in for the first time. "No way. You're like her dad. Like biologically and everything." Dad rolled his eyes at him and responded, "Yes, Emmett. Biologically and everything. Well then that makes me your uncle." "Hi Bella. Pleasure to meet you. I'm Emmett, your dad's brother for the past 100 years. I can't wait to tell you about all the jokes I've been pulling on him for a century now." I giggled. "And this," he gestured to the beautiful blonde standing next to him, "is my Rosalie." It's very nice to meet you, Bella. Now I think we're all wondering what the story here is. Why don't we sit down? She pointed to the table with our abandoned food sitting neatly on the surface, remaining untouched. We all sat down, Jasper and Alice on my right, and Edward on my left. It was then that I noticed that Edward had been quiet throughout that whole emotional exchange. I looked at him, and he was still staring at Jasper and I in awe. I gave him an amused look. He quickly came into focus, and said, "Forgive me. It's just that I've been hearing Jasper's thoughts of his beloved daughter for the past century. I don't think either of us ever expected to find you." My thoughts quickly honed in on what he just said. He was a mind reader. Crap, does that mean he heard what I was thinking all day about his ravishing good looks? Does he know about Whitney? Is he going to tell anyone? However, my panic was apparently unnecessary because he quickly stated, "Yes, I'm a mind reader. But for whatever frustrating reason, I can't seem to read yours. It's proving to be quite an annoyance." He gave an apologetic crooked smile that made my stomach flutter again. Okay, he doesn't know anything, yet. Before I could ask any questions, Emmett looked at me excitedly and cut to the chase. "So Bells, how did you come to be a fellow Dracula?" I froze, and tried to scramble mentally for an appropriate answer. I didn't know if I was ready to tell that story, and Daddy certainly isn't ready to hear it. Thankfully, Dad saved me. "Emmett, why don't we wait until we are home to hear the story? I'm sure Isabella won't want to have to repeat it a million times, and that way Carlisle and Esme can hear." I was thankful to Dad for saying that, but he said it in such a tone that shut down anyone with the idea to ask me again. The way he said it proved me right. He wasn't ready to hear what happened to his baby girl. Imagine what he'd say if he knew his baby girl had a baby girl. I looked up at him to find him looking down upon me worriedly. As if he knew something happened. As if he was concerned I was going to disappear any second. I squeezed his hand reassuringly, and then continued in conversation with the rest of the table. I started to wonder about my father's own story. What happened when he went to war? Did he ever miss me? Did he ever miss Mama? When did he find Alice? I had a feeling I would be finding all of these things out very soon. Then the bell rang, and I was delighted to find that I had the next class. Geometry, with Dad. Before he and I could leave to go to class, the rest of the family compared schedules with me. I found that I had my 5th class, biology, with the beautiful Edward. Then I had gym with Rosalie, and child and lifespan development with Emmett. The family arranged for me to follow them home after school today, and then I would meet Carlisle and Esme. I was looking forward to that. But not necessarily the part where I would share my story. I guessed it needs to be done, but I might edit out some parts. I just hoped Dad could still look at me the same afterwards. I hoped he was ready. Most of my school day went by without much more incidents. I mean, how much more dramatic could it get than finding out your real father was still alive and you were finally being reunited after a century and a half? There were a lot of stares and whispers about the Cullens and I, but nothing I was incapable of handling. Dad's reaction was pretty intense however. At least to the male attention I was receiving. Not that he had anything to worry about of course, but he got noticeably more stiff and closer to me whenever some guy made a comment about me that they thought I wouldn't hear. However unnecessary it was kind of amusing to watch. Even though I was having fun reconnecting with Daddy, and I was still kind of in shock about the whole thing, my nerves were getting ridiculous. I didn't know what to tell the family after school, and I didn't know how they would react. Would they push me away? Would they be completely and utterly disgusted? I don't know if I could handle losing Dad a second time. And then there was Edward. I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get his smile out of my head, or his laugh to stop ringing in my ears like music. I really couldn't figure out what that feeling in my gut was every time I thought of him. It was more than just the baby moving, it was anxious and strange and scary, but it felt good. Whatever the feeling was, I think I liked it. My confusing thought process was interrupted when the final bell rang. I looked over at Emmett, who was already packed up and ready to go. He nudged me. "You ready to go meet the head vamps, Bells?" I smiled weakly and followed him to the parking lot, where the Cullens had already figured out the seating arrangements. Alice and Edward were in his Volvo, Rosalie and Emmett in his Jeep. I was a little confused as to where Dad would be, and then he quickly scoffed at the idea of riding with Edward, when apparently wanted some alone time with me. Not that I minded him riding with me, not one bit. It would be nice to have him to myself, even if just for a short drive. I was about to climb into the driver's seat when Daddy stopped me and opened up the passenger door for me. I was confused. I mean, I know he's the dad and all, but it was my car. I opened my mouth to protest when he quieted me by saying, I'm driving. You've never driven to our house before, I'm your father, so I get to drive you whether you like it or not. I missed out on this chance too many times. He smiled. Besides, it's only right for a gentleman to drive the lady. I sighed and let him be. If it made him happy, then I guess I could let him drive, this time. We got into the car and followed his siblings to the Cullen residence. The drive there was beautifully strange. We laughed about old times and looked forward to new ones. It was very emotional for both of us, but in a good way. We were both just so grateful to be in each other's presence again. But the closer we got to the house, the more my nerves built. Dad apparently sensed this, because he said, Bella, relax. Everyone already loves you, and there's nothing you could do to change that. Especially since I'd kill anyone who said as much as once negative thing to you. He ended with a laugh. Who says I'm not relaxed? I challenged. He chuckled. Well, Bella, I know you aren't relaxed for two very specific reasons. First of all, I'm your father. It's my job to know how you're feeling, no matter how long it's been. I know you too well. Secondly, I guess it's time to let you know my gift. I'm an empath. I can detect emotions around me. And I can manipulate them as well. I guess that would make sense. Dad was always very charming as a human, and very aware of others' feelings. What other gifts does your family have? I felt a pang of sadness as I said the words your family. I was no longer his only family. He had a new big family that he's grown close to over the past 100 years. He no longer needed me. And the family certainly didn't either. Dad seemed to register my sorrow for the brief moment, but chose to let it go. Well, as Edward told you at lunch, he's a mind reader. By the way, the rest of us love that he can't read your mind. It's driving him crazy. He laughed as he turned a corner on the road. Then, Alice can see the future, but her visions are not set in stone. The future changes as decisions change. Those are the only special gifts of the family, except for yours, of course, if you have one. Do you? It took me a moment to respond, because I was so touched at the way he imaged. I counted me as part of the family without hesitation. I knew I was his family, but I was so touched that he automatically assumed the rest of the family would agree. He looked at me expectantly, and I remembered his question. Yes, I do. I have the gift to manipulate someone's decisions mentally. However, I don't particularly enjoy having that much power over someone, so I only use it if absolutely necessary. I wondered briefly if he would ask when it had ever been absolutely necessary, but he chose to let that go as well. It seemed that neither of us wanted to talk about the negative things that brought us to this moment. And just enjoy the time we had together. However, as he pulled into the driveway of the beautiful Cullen home, I knew the negativity was about to come to surface. I hardly had time to admire the beauty of the building before I was embraced by two unfamiliar, yet friendly faces. One was the woman I assumed to be Renesmee, the mother of the coven. She hugged me with strong yet gentle arms. And I could easily see why she was so adored. She had a pale, heart-shaped face, and long caramel hair that beautifully framed her delicate features. Oh Isabella, it is so nice to meet you. When Alice called, we could hardly believe it. Welcome to our home, she said warmly. A very handsome man, whom I assumed was Carlyle, then greeted me. He had a firm handshake, but his face was filled with nothing but love and kindness. Yes, Isabella, we are very glad to have you here. We already consider you as family, as you are to Jasper. I thanked him from the heart, and then Polly. Telly told them that calling me Bella was just fine, even though I did find it strange to be called Bella again. It felt right. I was happy. Renesmee quickly led me into the house, and showed me to the living room. I found the interior of the house to be eloquently decorated, and concluded that it was a talent of Renesmee's. We all made polite small talk for a while, and then Carlyle said, "So Bella, if you don't mind. I think we are all very curious as to why we're so thankfully blessed with your presence today. What is your story?" I took a deep breath, smiled before beginning, knowing I might not smile for a while after this. Well, it all started after Daddy left for war. I looked straight at Dad, knowing I wouldn't be able to look at anyone else while telling this painful story. I knew I had to tell the whole thing, because he deserved to know. When he left, it was obviously just Mama and I. So we had a neighbor who decided to help us out. He helped in our fields, he made sure we had food, and he helped Mama a lot with me. I was 6, so I was a handful. Naturally, we trusted him very much. His name was James. I felt my heart break and my eyes grow distant, my mind taking me back to this time. I missed Daddy more than anything. But we were doing okay. Everything was relatively fine until we got word that Dad had gone missing. That was when Mama started to fall apart, and I either had to be independent or rely on James for everything. I paused to take in Dad's painful expression. He looked heartbroken already, and I knew there was so much to come. I was pretty good at taking care of myself. But there were always things that an adult was needed for. Then when Mama died, James had full custody of me. I trusted him, and so did Mama. It started out fine. He helped me get over the loss of my mother. And he gave me space when I needed it. Then he changed. Suddenly he became very different around the time I was 16. He was gone longer, and he looked so much scarier. Now of course I realize, he had become a vampire. And was trying not to kill me. I looked at Daddy again to find a mix of emotions playing out on his face: anger, thankfulness that I had someone to look after me, and sadness. But overall love and understanding. Then came the day that boys tried to start courting me. James and I hadn't been very close that year, but he immediately grew very possessive at the mention of any boy. I was 16, so it was the appropriate age for me to settle down and find a husband. But for whatever reason, James couldn't stand the thought of me belonging to any of the men who came to him, asking for my hand. He killed them all. My voice was dead and lifeless up until this part of the story where I knew it would get increasingly difficult to tell. One day, he came home from hunting and was in a pretty good mood until he asked what I did all day. I was too naive to lie to him, so I told him the truth. That I had spent most of my day on the porch, drinking sweet tea with some guy who had come calling. His mood changed instantly, and that's when he grabbed me. I heard various gasps throughout the room, very shortly followed by growls, especially from Daddy. He threw me down onto the floor, and told me that I was not to talk to any of the boys that came to me. When he asked if I understood, my voice was apparently too quivery for his liking. He slapped me across the face. My voice broke a little, and I had to clear my throat before beginning again. Then he told me I was too pretty for all those boys, and I had only one option as far as mates: him. Then, he raped me, and ran away quickly after locking me in the house. I paused, and looked down. All I could hear was the increasing volume of Daddy's growls. Then he said through clenched teeth, "I'm going to hunt him down and rip him apart, bone by bone. Then I'm going to burn every piece of him pathetic flesh until he rots in hell." He didn't speak anymore, because Alice was finally a tiny bit successful in calming him down enough to stop giving death threats. Everyone in the room was still growling though. I wondered if I should continue the story, but I decided it was best to just get it over with. I continued. I couldn't move or eat anything for a few days. I was in shock, I guess. I didn't do anything but lay there and cry until I heard him entering the house a few days later. He came in, apologized profusely and helped me clean myself up. I thought everything was all right again, and then it developed into a cycle of sorts. Whenever he was mad, which was basically every other day or so, he'd rape me. Then he'd go hunting. It was just the way things were. After I turned 17, I discovered what I never thought could have happened, since I knew about vampires by that point. I was pregnant. Everyone in the room gasped, but I kept going. I was so afraid and I didn't know what to do. So I told James, expecting him to comfort me or something. How wrong I was. He decided that having a baby was out of the question, so he bit me. He thought the venom would instantly kill the baby. Problem solved. Then, while waiting for me to wake up while I changed, he raped me one last time. I was so out of it that I couldn't even try to fight back. All I could do was scream at him in my mind to stop. That was the moment the change was complete, I guess, because my power kicked in. I have the gift to manipulate actions through my mind. He immediately was flung off my body by some supernatural force, and I tore him to pieces. Then I ran away until I came to a safe place. I then realized I was thirsty, but tea wasn't a burn in my throat that notified me. It was a fluttering of my stomach. My baby. See, the venom didn't kill my baby. It just froze her development as it did to all of us. So now, the baby is with me wherever I go. She never dies, but can never be born. I love her more than anything, except for you, Daddy. I looked up at him to see his face in shock. I settled in a small town in Tennessee, and I've been moving ever since. I thought I was safe at the time, finally free from James. But when I tore his body apart, I forgot to burn the remains, and it seems that a female vampire had come across his body. She put him back together. Her name is Victoria. I received a phone call a few years later that they had found me and they were coming for me. Victoria apparently didn't mind her mate lusting after another. I've been running from them ever since, trying to protect my baby, but I haven't heard from them in a while. So it's just the baby and I. That's my story. I shut my mouth, closed my eyes, and waited for them to kick me out. Everyone was in silence for a few minutes, until I felt Dad's strong arms circle me. He held me close and whispered, "Oh Bella, baby, I'm so sorry I couldn't be there to protect you. This is all my fault. I'm here now though, sweetie. I love you." I pulled back. "You mean you aren't mad at me?" Not completely disgusted. My jaw dropped. His eyes widened and his brow furrowed in confusion. "Bella, you thought I would be mad at you? Disgusted at my own flesh and blood? Bella, you didn't do anything wrong. This is hardly your fault. If anyone is to blame other than that little pathetic James." Dad sneered his name, "Then it is me. I'm the one that left for war, I'm the one who didn't protect you." I shook my head. "It's in the past, Dad. Besides, you didn't know. It isn't your fault. I'm just glad we're here now." The other Cullens chose this moment to speak up. "Oh Bella, we're so glad you're safe now. Thank God you're here now. Oh, a baby. The poor baby. You've been very strong, Bella. Let's go kick some James' butt." That last comment came from Emmett. I looked over to Edward, who was completely silent for the second time today. He was shaking violently, and looked ready to kill. Edward?" I asked tentatively. He just looked up at us and muttered, "I'll kill him. I'll kill him. I'm going to kill him." It was kind of scary, but also very attractive in a weird way. Emmett and Daddy immediately agreed with him, and then followed the rest of the bunch. I did my best to reassure them that it was in the past, but I was once more overwhelmed with the amount of love this family was showing to a complete stranger, with the exception of Daddy, of course. I felt kind of silly calling him Daddy, but I lost him at such an early age. I missed out on too many chances to call him Daddy. So I didn't think he'd mind it now. Finally, he looked up at me and a smile slowly filled up his face. "A baby? Really, Bella? I'm sort of like a grandfather." This comment earned sarcastic teasing from the rest of the group, but he didn't care. "Yes, you're a grandfather. And you said she. How do you know it's a girl?" I smiled to myself. "I don't. I just kind of have the intuition." "Does she have a name?" I took a deep breath. No one else had ever heard her name before. But if I was going to tell someone, it should be Daddy. "Yes, Whitney. Whitney Jasmine Whitlock." His face was filled with love and adoration. "Whitney Jasmine Whitlock. Wow, I love it, sweetheart. Thank you for naming your precious child after me. After us." He paused. "By the way, I refuse to call you by the surname of Harrison. You are Bella Whitlock. It was a good name when you were born, and it's a good name now." I smiled and agreed. Whatever made him happy. Then he surprised me and turned to Carlisle with an excited look on his face. "Carlisle, do you think there's a way you could give Bella an ultrasound? Maybe we could deliver this baby?" he asked, hope evident in his voice. Carlisle looked deep in thought, as if this was already something he had been considering. "Well, I'll do some research, son. I'll try, if nothing else." He smiled and looked at me. "If that's okay with you, of course." I thought about it. Never had I considered being able to have my baby. Sure, I'd daydreamed about playing with her. I'd fantasized about what she would look like. Would she look like me? Would she look like Daddy at all? Although it might depress me if she resembled James, I would still love her the same. I nodded. "Yes, I'd like the chance to have my daughter." "It's decided then. I'll begin research immediately." Daddy cut in. "Bella, where are you living? It would bring me such great joy to have you live here with us. In fact, since I'm your father, and you are technically still a minor, I demand that you live with us." I was about to protest, saying I couldn't impose like that, when the rest of the family jumped in agreement with my dad. Man, he really liked using the line "I'm your father." I guess he's missed saying it. "Please, Bella, we'll have so much fun. We'll set up a room for you and everything. Please." I looked to Alice, who had the puppy dog face on. I didn't think I could say no to that. I looked over to Dad. And he was wearing the same face, except for his was more triumphant, as if he knew he'd already won. I decided I'd accept the offer, and then opened my mouth to say it. "Oh my gosh, Bella, yes. I have to go shopping for your room." Alice cut in. "Oh yeah, future seeing pixie. The rest of the family started to celebrate, and then Dad prodded me into picking up my few belongings from my cabin while Rosalie, Esme, and Alice went shopping for my room. I trusted Rose and Esme to keep Alice in check. I just hoped they could pick out stuff that went with my personality, and that they didn't spend too much. Edward volunteered to go with Daddy and I, and the girls went shopping. Carlisle and Emmett had to hunt. We all went our separate ways. As I walked to my car with the two men following behind me, I was lost in thought. I'm about to be alone in a car with my father, and the single most attractive man I've ever seen in my entire life. Oh crap, can Daddy tell that I'm attracted to Edward? I looked over at him, and the annoyed look on his face as he looked in between Edward and I told me that yes, he very well could. There I sat, in the passenger seat, giving Dad directions to my short-lived place of residence while Edward sat in the backseat, absorbed in the music I had playing. He seemed to like it, and I stored that information away in my mind. Debussy, he likes Debussy. Of course it was completely wasteful to have 3 of us here, when I only had 2 boxes of things. Not that either of them listened to reason. Daddy wasn't saying anything, just holding my hand and squeezing it tightly every time I got jittery. I wondered if this was not only just his way of calming me, but also of marking me as still his baby girl. I obviously knew Edward would never feel anything for me, when he could have any girl he wanted, but Daddy without a doubt felt the attraction I was feeling. This might be him trying to tell me that I'm his baby, and his baby is not allowed to like boys. I tried to relax into my seat and process everything that had happened today. I went to a new school. I found Dad. I met an entire family of vampires who already were embracing me as their own. I was moving in with said vampires. I was irrevocably attracted to the only single one in the coven, and I couldn't quite figure out why. I had never been attracted to anyone, like ever, and to top everything off, they knew my story, and they wanted to help me with my baby. I closed my eyes and pictured what life would be like, if I had my baby. I would have a reason, a purpose. I would have someone to love, someone to cherish for the rest of my days. Everything would be so much brighter, and I couldn't help but think it was too good to be true. Even if I couldn't deliver Whitney though, I would still have Daddy, as long as it was safe to stay here. If there ever came a point in time where James found me again, I would of course leave as to not put Daddy and the rest of the Cullens in danger. Dad finally pulled into the driveway, and sat in his seat for a moment or two before moving to get up. I looked at him strangely, as Edward was already unbuckling. Daddy, you okay? You live here? No, this is much too small. Thank heavens you're moving in with us. Well Dad, it's a pretty good size for just one person to live. I don't need much. He just snorted at me, and then got out to open my door for me. He stopped short, however, when he realized that Edward had beaten him to the punch. It was nice and I appreciated it, but Daddy certainly didn't seem to feel the same way. He quickly marched into the house with a grunt. I looked to Edward, who was staring after Daddy with an amused look on his face. What is he thinking? I asked after a moment or so. Edward looked to me and smiled gently before letting his gorgeous crooked smile fall into a smirk. He's just going into soldier mode, thinking he has to protect his little girl and all. I don't think he much enjoys me being here, and I'm sorry if you feel like I'm intruding, but I happen to be very glad I came. I smiled and giggled a bit, feeling like a 10-year-old little girl. No, I like you being here too. Apparently Daddy heard me say this, because we heard a loud growl coming from the entrance of the house. We quickly exchanged glances and hurried into the first room of the home, the kitchen. The room was empty, as I saw no point in furnishing a room I would never use. Upon seeing this, they moved to the next room. They kept repeating the process with confused looks on their faces. Until I informed them that all of my stuff was in the bedroom. They both gave exaggerated huffs and followed me to my room, where I had 2 boxes already sitting there. This is it? Dad asked. What about clothes? He looked to the closet. Daddy, my clothes are in that box. I pointed to the box on the left. I told you, I really don't need much. After hearing this, Dad just got this look of immense concern on his face. And then informed me that he was going to let Alice buy a whole new wardrobe for me. Great, Edward spoke up. Bella, if you don't mind me asking, what's in the other box? I smiled warmly, and opened the folds of the box in order to reveal the contents to the 2 men. Edward remained silent while Daddy immediately gasped. Bella, you kept all of this? He let his fingers slide through all of our faded tokens of the past. He went through the dresses, the pictures, and even the locket he gave me before he left. Then his hands fell to one particular letter. He cleared his throat and began to read his own faded handwriting from many years ago. My little baby girl, tonight I write this with a heavy heart. I just put you to bed. And I can hear you safely sleeping in your room across the hall. Your mother and I have not told you yet, but today I was notified that I am needed in battle. I have to go fight for a while, and I leave in 2 weeks. I'll be back before you know it though, and I will think of you the whole time. When you get lonely, I hope you remember that I'll be missing you too, sweetheart. Daddy loves you, and I'll return soon to tuck you in at night after reading you a bedtime story. Don't ever doubt my love, for it will always be there. If, however, something happens to me, I need you to be strong. Can you do that for Daddy? Take care of Mama, and of yourself. Don't forget me, because I'll be watching over you from a safer place. We will be together again someday, no matter what. I love you with all my heart, sweet Bella. You are my whole world. Daddy. He looked up at me and smiled. I spent every night after that writing you letters. And they're all in that box. I pointed to the stack of yellowed parchment. Everything I said is still true, Bella. He pulled me close to him and stroked my hair. Look, here we are. Together again. It just took a little longer than expected. I felt him smile against my head as I chuckled. I turned my head and I saw Ed Ward observing with nothing but respect and happiness for us. That was a beautiful letter, Jasper. Who knew you could write? He chuckled. Daddy released me after messing with my hair and kissing my head, and then grabbed the 2 boxes. He carried them both to my car, and he didn't even flinch when Edward opened my door again for me. He was that happy to be my dad again. We rode home in complete bliss, singing along badly to each song on the radio. We all laughed and genuinely enjoyed each other. We got home quickly and I sighed in contentment. Home, what a nice word. Daddy carried my stuff to wherever my new room was, while Edward gave me a tour of my new house. We went through all of the obvious ones, like the kitchen or living room. Then he led me through Emmett and Rosalie's room, which was elaborately decorated. I then saw Alice and Daddy's room. That was weird for me, but I was amused to see Alice's taste everywhere. Then Edward took me past Dad's study, which he said no one was allowed in without permission. Even Alice. It was his special place. I didn't mention that Daddy had already told me I could go in there anytime I wanted. Then we got to Edward's room. It was beautiful, to say the least. Simple and elegant, but beautiful. What really got my attention was the giant grand piano in the middle of the room. Do you play? He asked. Only a little. I didn't really want to mention that it was one of my greatest loves in life. I was sure he would find out from Daddy eventually anyway. I'd love to hear you play sometime. He smiled, and then leaned in closer to my face. He scent of his breath was so intoxicating. Between the sweetness of his smell, and the connection our eyes kept making, I could barely think straight. Likewise, I managed to get out. Then I heard someone calling for me. Bella, come see your room. I walked to the source of the voice, and followed Rosalie, Alice, Daddy, and Edward to my new room, which was conveniently located across the hall from Edward's and Daddy's. I took a deep breath and walked in. I was taken aback at how great they had managed to make it look in such a short amount of time. All of the furniture was black and white, with red detail everywhere. There were even candles scattered and a glorious chandelier. It had a king-sized bed, with a black and gold Victorian-styled comforter. It was perfect. Do you like it? Jazzy said you would. We'll paint it tomorrow. We chose a lovely musky gold color. It will complement the candles beautifully. Alice said. I broke out into a smile. I love it, Alice, really. It's perfect. Thank you. She predictably squealed. And the let out, oh yay Bella, I'm so glad you like it. Tomorrow after we paint, we'll go shopping. Your father told me you had 1 box of clothes. How is that even possible? Don't worry, we'll fix it tomorrow. I barely had time to give my consent before she rushed everyone out the door, giving me time to embrace my space, as she so cutely put it. I could tell Edward and Daddy didn't really want to leave, but I didn't want to hurt Alice's feelings by asking just them to stay. So I just laid down on my massive bed for a while, just absorbing my day. Then, the nerd in me decided it was time to read. So I turned to the bookshelf that took up an entire wall. Then I realized there were no books. Then I saw a little folded up piece of paper. I grinned and unfolded it to read. Bella, you truly are my daughter, because you have inherited my love of books. I know you have your own books in those boxes, but I would like to welcome you to enter into my study at any time. It is full of books. And I want you to pick any book you want. Any books you ever choose will be yours to keep, and you can fill up these bookshelves with not only books, but pieces of me as well. Dward has a collection I'm positive he'd be willing to share, but nothing would please me more than to provide for my daughter in this way. I love that we share this passion. Sorry about Alice's shopping, by the way. She can be a little overwhelming at times, but I hope you can eventually love her. You are the two most important women in the world to me, and I would love to see you become close. I love you forever, Daddy. I smiled to myself. Daddy had nothing to worry about. I already loved Alice. I was just standing up to make my way to his study when I heard a quiet knock at my door. Alice peeked her head in. Hey Bella, I was wondering if you had a minute. I'd like to talk to you about something. It was the first time in the very short time I'd known her that she sounded nervous. Sure, Alice, come on in. I said awkwardly in what I hoped was a sweet tone. She quickly shut the door and we both sat on the edge of my bed. Is everything okay? Yes, Bella, it's just that, well, I know we've only known you for a day. However, you are obviously really important to Jasper. He loves being your dad, he really has never stopped loving you. She paused, and I wondered where she was going with this. I nodded, and she continued. Well, I know you had a mother in your human life. I'm not looking to replace her. But, you're very important to your father. And if you ever want a mother figure in your life, I'm here. I'll love you like my own daughter. I can be your sister and your friend, but I'm here for you if you want more. I took a moment to process what she said. She wanted to be my mom. No, that wasn't what she said. She wanted to be a motherly figure in my life. Although I couldn't really picture calling the tiny pixie in front of me Mom, it would be nice to have that relationship. That would be very nice. Alice, thank you. It's good to know you're there. As much as I love Daddy, there are some places where a mom could come in handy. I thought about Dad. Surely this would make him happy. I smiled. Her entire face lit up. Really? Well, I'm glad you feel that way. Don't worry, I'm not going to start acting weird around you or anything. I rolled my eyes mentally. As if her normal behavior was, well, normal. I smiled at her and gave her a casual but meaningful hug. She thanked me again and left the room. I thought about the conversation after she left. The Cullens really were embracing me as their own. Technically, I was Dad's own. But I never would have expected the rest of the family to be so welcoming. I hoped I wouldn't let them down. I stood and went to Dad's study, across the hall. I needed a book. I was in the mood for a classic romance, maybe Pride and Prejudice. It was one of my all-time favorites. I slowly opened the door, and stepped into the room with a full heart. I kept getting flashbacks of when I used to go out into the fields with Daddy while he worked. I wasn't much help, of course, but I always enjoyed seeing him so focused on his work. I got the same feeling now. Even though he wasn't in the room. I observed the scene around me. There were books everywhere. I mean everywhere. I felt like I was in heaven, especially when I looked around. At all the cozy chairs and the fireplace in the room. I immediately began my search for the perfect book. I went through shelves and shelves, and I found about 1,000,000 of my favorites, and 1,000,000 on more that I wanted to read but had not yet done so. I spotted an old copy of Pride and Prejudice though across the room, and I started to make my way to the book I came here for. When crossing the room, I walked past his desk. There was nothing significant about the piece of furniture, until a framed photo sitting on it caught my eye. I reached out to pick up the picture, and I nearly dropped in shock when I saw two pairs of my old brown eyes staring back at me. Daddy and I, when I must have been maybe 3 or 4. He was holding me in his arms and planting a sweet kiss on my cheek. We both looked so happy and carefree. I was in complete adoration of my father, and he looked just as taken with me. They say human memories fade, but I remember Daddy like it was all just yesterday. I was so touched that he had kept this picture, and kept it in a place that he saw it every day. I realized this was how he must have felt when he saw my box of old memories. Bella, my head snapped up to see Daddy closing the door of the room. Oh, I'm sorry, I was just getting a book, and then I trailed off, and simply held up the old photograph. He walked over to me and put his hand on my shoulder. Bella, never apologize for being in here. What's mine is yours, you're my daughter. He saw what I was looking at. Oh, I see you spotted my old favorite picture. He smiled at me. You were such a sweet baby girl. I can't believe you kept this. I looked down at the picture and then back to my father's golden eyes. I smiled and my eyes were filled with tears I would never shed. He smiled warmly at me. Of course I kept it. Now open the top drawer of my desk. I furrowed my brow in confusion, but followed his directions. My jaw dropped. Inside the drawer were pictures of me. As a baby, on each birthday, on Christmases, and other random occasions. Some he was with me in, and some he wasn't. Daddy, wow, I felt his arms wrap around me. And now you're all grown up and beautiful. But you'll always be my little baby girl, Bella. When I left for war, I took all of these with me. After I was changed, I always made sure I had them with me. No one else in the family has ever seen them, not even Alice. As always so painful to think about how I lost you. I nodded. I understood, it was the same reason I had stopped going by the name Bella. Dad, how were you changed? I had figured it was in his time in the war, but I didn't know the story. He sighed and then took my hand. Well baby, there was a lot that happened between me leaving and me meeting Alice. I did some things I'm not very proud of. Let's make that a story for another day. After all, we've got forever. He ended with a peaceful look on his face. I let it go. I would make him tell me eventually, and he knew it. But I didn't know what Daddy could have done so wrong. He was the best person I knew. So what book were you looking for? He changed the subject and put his arms on his hips. I was actually making my way over to Pride and Prejudice. It's one of my favorites. Daddy rolled his eyes. Of course. Well, it is a classic. He said as he retrieved the book for me. Well, I was just going to do some reading myself. Feel free to take a seat and read in here. I accepted his invitation and plopped myself down in a seat by the fireplace, which was lit and gave the room a relaxing ambiance. We stayed like that for a good half hour, just reading to ourselves and enjoying each other's company. Every now and then I would look up at him to find him looking at me in pure bliss. Like he was just so overjoyed to have me back. I was sure my face held the same expression. I had just reached my favorite part of the book when I let out a little Alice-like squeal. Dad looked up at me and raised an eyebrow. Feeling romantic? This book is one of the most romantic ones around. Of course I'm feeling romantic. His eyes grew fierce. Well, let's just get one thing clear. He walked over to me, kissed my forehead, and his eyes gentled. No man or vampire alive is good enough for my baby girl. Certainly none in this house. This was one of those times that I was thankful to be a vampire. I knew if I were human, I would have been doing some hardcore blushing. Daddy, I don't. Bella, you do know I'm an empath, right? I feel attractions. He chuckled. It's normal to be attracted to people, sweetheart. But I just got you back, and I'm certainly not ready to give you up to anyone. Especially him. Besides, as I previously mentioned, he isn't good enough for you. He smiled and kissed my forehead again. I was disappointed that Daddy was so against me dating. Wait, what? I didn't want to date. I didn't even freaking want to date. Daddy was right. Attractions are normal, healthy, even, but I did not want to date Edward Cullen. I absolutely did not want to date Edward Cullen. Maybe eventually I'd convince myself. Around 6 in the morning, I looked out the window. I sighed. The sun was coming up, and that meant going back to school. I had been in Dad's study reading this whole time. He had left a few hours ago, to go have his private time with Alice. I shuddered thinking about it. I'm a big girl, Dad, and I do not want to think about what you and Alice do in your private time. I thought about the day ahead of me as I walked to my room and saw an outfit on my bed with a note from Alice. It read, Bella, we'll go shopping after school today. But for now, wear this. Then come to my room. Great, she probably had some makeover awaiting me. Just what I always wanted. I observed the outfit in front of me. It wasn't that bad. I was sure Daddy had reined her in a bit. For my sake. For that I was grateful. There was a black and white designer blouse, a red jacket, black skinny jeans, and red pumps. Not what I would have chosen, but it's cute. I dressed quickly and then took my sweet time in making my way to Alice's room. I briefly considered just not going, and then I heard her yell. Bella, don't you dare. Get your butt in here. Oh yeah, the whole future seeing thing would take some getting used to. I heard Dad chuckle at his wife, and I guess that meant I was going. I put on a smile and walked into their room. Dad was sitting on their bed, listening to music and watching gleefully. I shot a glare at him. He knew I didn't like foo-foo girly stuff. He just laughed. Thanks, Dad. Alice stood there, completely oblivious to the exchange between Daddy and myself. Just clapping and jumping. Bella, okay, so sit down right there, and I'll get started. We only have 30 minutes before we leave, so I won't be able to do as much as I'd like, but that's okay for today. She pointed to a chair in front of a vanity with all sorts of hair and makeup products, waiting to make a whole new me. Because the old me was so last season. I looked at the determined yet blissful look on her face and decided not to fight this battle today. I let her have her way. I sat there and tried not to groan at every tug and pull to my hair, or every pat and press to my face. She blabbered on and on about how the day would go, and I tried to keep up. So people are going to be curious about what happened yesterday between you and your dad. Our story will be that you are biological siblings and you were split up. He was adopted into the Cullen family, and you were adopted elsewhere. Your adoptive parents are dead, so you are emancipated. After seeing Jasper, Carlisle and Esme have decided to take you in. Now, people believe Rosalie and Jasper are twins, so you are also siblings with her. I thought through everything she said, and it made sense. Even though it would be weird to call Daddy by his name as my brother, it would probably provoke some strange reactions if I referred to him as my father. Another thing is that they know you as Marie Harrison. We will call you Marie in front of others, since it would confuse people if you suddenly changed your name to Bella Whitlock. So don't forget to respond to Marie. I was used to Marie, so I wouldn't have a problem with that. Okay Bella, you're done, just in time. Look in the mirror. I opened my eyes and I was pleasantly surprised at my reflection. It wasn't too over the top, but the raw additions to my appearance looked nice. My long brown hair was down my back in soft curls, and my golden irises were accented with a deep brown eyeshadow. I also had a simple coat of mascara, and some light pink lip gloss. I looked nice, I suppose. Thank you Alice, I love it. I smiled up at her and she beamed. We then heard Edward and his impatient foot tapping from downstairs. Okay, we'd better go. If we don't he'll yell at us in approximately 7 seconds. Alice said quickly as we all rushed down the stairs in vampire speed. Edward looked irritated and looked up at us to make some snide remark when his eyes caught mine. Are you guys ready to go? He stumbled. Alice smirked. Dad narrowed his eyes briefly. I simply smiled shyly. Alice decided to answer for us, since I was too busy getting lost in Edward's golden eyes. They were so deep, so full of emotion. They were full of curiosity, care, and some other emotion I couldn't quite put my finger on. Whatever it was beautiful. Yes, we're ready to go. Stop hassling us Edward, Alice remarked. She then walked straight out to the garage. Daddy lagged behind, watching Edward and me. When Alice realized this, she not so subtly pulled him to her side. And practically forced him into the backseat with her of Edward's Volvo. I could faintly hear her saying, "Geez Jasper. Settle it down, they haven't done anything wrong." Edwa rode and I finally got the hint and started walking to the car, side by side. He smiled at me, and then commented in his most gentlemanly voice, "You look very beautiful today, Isabella." Isabella, howdy. Did he make my full name sound so perfect? I was 2 seconds away from swooning, and I thanked my lucky stars once more for my inability to blush. Thank you Edward. As we approached the car, I noticed that Alice had saved the passenger seat for me. I quirked an eyebrow at her. What are you up to, little pixie? She simply smiled, and I noticed Daddy had just settled for glaring at Edward and I. I didn't help matters when Edward so respectfully opened my car door for me. I, however, do not mind at all. I mentally smacked myself. What was I doing? I can't get swept away by some pretty face. The atmosphere on the drive to school was tense. Alice was busied by her attempts at distracting Dad, but he was determined to watch every move Edward or I made. As uncomfortable as that was though, Edward and I seemed to escape into our own world. We both loved the music that was playing, and we sang along as loud and obnoxiously as possible. As purposefully off as we were being though, I discovered that Edward had a beautiful voice. Oh, I love a man who can sing. No, I don't love it. Absolutely not. I glanced at the man next to me. What was he doing to me? How was he turning all of my feelings upside down? What kind of sick game was that? I sighed as we reached the building, and Alice dragged Daddy to class to privately reprimand him. Oh well, Edward had just opened my door when he asked me what class 1 was going to first. I told him it was Spanish, and he brightly offered to walk me there. Then he made me hand over my books for him to carry. Why did he insist on being so perfect? Didn't he know it was messing with me? As we walked to my class, we received lots of glares from both genders. Girls were jealous of me, naturally. The most beautiful boy in the building was carrying my books. Then I suppose guys were jealous of him, but I couldn't imagine why they would be any more jealous than usual of him. I was nothing special, not next to Edward Cullen, I wasn't. I ducked my head to look at the ground under all the glares. Edward seemed to notice this. He leaned down and whispered in my ear, "You wouldn't believe what all these idiots are thinking." I looked up at him and smiled. "Give me an example." He seemed to consider this and chose his top 3. "Well, that guy over there," he casually pointed to the boy I recognized as Mike Newton, "just thought, why is Cullen walking with my girl? I could take him." I laughed. The concept of any measly human taking a vampire was comical enough, but to think of being Mike Newton's girl. The concept was absolutely ridiculous. "Yes, Mike made his admiration of me known yesterday. He's in my first class. Better watch out for him," I added with a joking grin. Edward laughed heartily. "Oh, I'll certainly be on my guard." His face turned serious. "And if he does anything that makes you uncomfortable, I'd be more than happy to take care of that for you." It was then that I accidentally made eye contact with Mike, and Edward responded to that by defensively putting his free arm around me. I giggled as he whispered, "Let's really stir him up. See how he likes this." Newton's face immediately fell, along with several others on the campus. We arrived to my classroom shortly after that, and with one last glare to Mike, Edward walked to his class in such a beautiful manner that it made me want to cry. The class passed slowly, and I spent most of it trying to once more thwart the attempts made by Mike to ask me out. I was hoping that my moments with Edward this morning would keep him away, but they only seemed to make him more determined to win me over. Good luck with that one, buddy. Oh, if he only knew that I had the power to make him do anything I wanted. In fact, if we're being honest, I might have used an inkling of that power to get him to shut up once class started. It was during my next class that I started to notice my baby fluttering in my stomach again. Time to hunt, I wonder if Alice would let me out of shopping this afternoon so I could hunt. I bet I could sell it. I looked over to her sitting in the seat next to me, and whispered under my breath so lowly that no human stood a chance of hearing. "Hey Alice, how set are you on shopping after school?" The look I got in response told me that she was very set. "Come on, Bella, after all the trying I did with your dad this morning, don't you think you can spare some time to shop?" Then she pulled out the puppy dog eyes. I shook my head clear. "Alice, it isn't that I don't appreciate it. But I'm thirsty. If I go too long without hunting, Whitney starts kicking quite aggressively." I justified while I subconsciously rubbed my stomach, trying to soothe my unborn love. Her look softened. "Okay, I'll let you off this once. Only under one condition." I looked at her questionably. There was no telling what she would ask of me. "Edward will volunteer to go with you. I'll find some way to restrain your father. You have to let Edward go, and then you have to give me all the details." "Deal." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. I shied immediately. How did she know? She rolled her eyes. "Oh please. It doesn't take rocket science to figure out you guys like each other." It wasn't like she wouldn't know everything that happened anyway, but I agreed to the deal. It would be nice to be alone with Edward. I let my imagination wander for a while. I decided it was an excellent bargain I had just made. "Hey Alice." She looked up at me. "What do you see happening? What do you know? Has Edward saw eat anything?" She smiled a little too sweetly. "Oh Bella, I can't tell you or anyone what I've seen. What would the fun in that be? I've even distracted my thoughts around Edward so he doesn't know." I sighed at her, and that was the end of the conversation. My next class with Edward passed too quickly, and I found myself getting lost in conversation with him again. It was like we were the only two people in the world. The bell rang for lunch, and Alice quickly met Edward and I in the cafeteria. After he once more paid for my meal that I wouldn't be eating. She threw me a wink, and I took that as my cue to bring up hunting once we got to the table. I sat down and looked around at everyone. Dad was immediately at my side, as predicted, with Edward on the other. "So, Bella, where do you want to shop after school?" Alice's question got the attention of the family. I supposed it was her way of opening up the floor for Edward coming with me. I played up the act with her. "Well Alice, I was actually meaning to talk to you about that. I'm thirsty. The baby doesn't care for it when she doesn't get fed." I added with a hopeful smile. "I was hoping you might let me off the hook, just for today." Alice acted disappointed. Daddy reacted just as expected by putting an arm around her for comfort. Her face brightened up within seconds. "No worries. I'll take Jasper." She smiled while Dad grimaced. "Oh, But Bella, it's probably best if you take someone with you, since you're new to the area. Emmett spoke up. I'll take you, Bells. He was obviously completely oblivious to the situation. Rosalie apparently was in on it, because she put on some seductive face and turned to her husband. Oh, but Emmett, I had some plans for the two of us after school, she said while batting her eyelashes. When Emmett buckled under her loving gaze, she threw a wink at Alice and me. I'd be happy to accompany you, Bella. I turned to Edward, who looked nervous that I would reject his offer. Ha, even I'm not that stupid. I'd like that. Thank you, Edward, I said, and we just sat there beaming at each other. Until I heard Daddy clear his throat. I turned to my father, who looked apprehensive. Maybe I should go too. Just to make sure you're okay. Alice jumped in. Jasper, she's been on her own for a while now. Besides, she'll have Edward there. She'll be fine. I mouthed a silent thank you to Alice, because Dad allowed himself to be quieted, although he still looked nervous about the situation. She winked at me. In my next class, we had a sub, so it was basically a free day. Daddy and I talked freely, and I think it calmed him down a bit when I didn't dare to bring Edward up. Everything was back to normal for a while, and I had a stress-free day up until the final bell rang. Emmett and I walked out to the parking lot, and we stopped short when we saw Alice and Dad in the midst of a very heated conversation. Emmett pulled me into a corner where they wouldn't see us so he could eavesdrop. Okay, so we could eavesdrop. Alice, I just got my daughter back. Why should I let her go off and be alone? Nay, in the woods with a vampire she just met, that keeps making googly eyes at her. I feel the attractions they feel to each other. I'm not going to trust someone who feels such an intense romantic reaction to my daughter to take care of her. I gasped. Edward, he liked me. No, that couldn't possibly be true. Emmett saw my reaction and snickered. Oh silly Bella, it's obvious he likes you. All that gentleman crap. Coolies. I bit my lip, and he just started laughing again. Jasper, I understand that you're apprehensive. Bella will always be your little girl. But don't you think Bella deserves to be happy? After everything she's gone through, she deserves someone that makes her happy. Not that you don't, but she might feel lonely. Come on, even if they just end up as friends, don't you think? It would be healthy for her to at least have that. You're her father, I know you want what's best for her. You love her. I do love her, which is why I'm not going to let him hurt her. I wasn't there for so long, and now I can be there. She needs me, and there is no force on this planet that can stop me from being there for my little girl. None of us will let him hurt her, Jasper. She needs you, yes. But she might need him too. Just let them have today. If it doesn't go well, then we'll know that it isn't right. But just give them a chance. And for heaven's sakes, stop glaring at the poor kids. If he hurts her, Dad trailed off after that, hanging his head in acceptance that his wife was probably right. He has one day to prove to me that he's worth a chance with her. It was then that Emmett and I decided to make our entrance. Acting as if we hadn't heard anything. Daddy was acting especially attentive though. He kept hugging me, and kissing my forehead. All of the other students had already left, so we didn't have anything to worry about. Edward and Rose joined us shortly, and we all took off in our respective vehicles. We drove to the house, and I dropped all of my school stuff off. Alice quickly dragged Daddy away to the mall before he could do anything to Edward. He was pretty on edge. Are you ready, Isabella? Edward peeked his head in my room. Oh yes. I looked out the window before leaving the room. Did Alice say what the weather was going to be? The skies looked dark and murky. Yes, I believe she predicted rain. He held up two very expensive-looking overcoats. Alice gave me these before they left. And with that, we took off. We ran out of the house, freely into the beautiful forest. I followed Edward, since he seemed to know where he was going. A scent of an elk very quickly caught my nose. And I followed the trail. Edward seemed to smell it as well, because he was going after it. We found a herd of elk drinking from a pool of water, and very quickly and painlessly took them out. I had just finished taking out the last of my elk, when I looked over at Edward. He was enjoying his own, and I noticed how fascinating he looked when he was hunting. He was a completely different person, but still somewhat the same. He was wild and free, very manly in the way he just took control. It was kind of a turn on. Okay, it was definitely a turn on. Then there was another side of him that was completely gentle and caring, like normal. The way he handled killing the animal was beautiful. He put effort into making sure it felt absolutely no pain in death. I was beginning to learn that everything this man did was beautiful. He finished, and looked up at me. I couldn't quite tell you what was different about this time, but this connection our eyes held was so strong. Neither of us could break it. And I don't think either of us wanted to. We stood, and slowly walked closer to each other, never breaking eye contact. The air was quickly getting colder, and a loud CRA. Shish of thunder broke as soon as we were inches away from each other. Bella, he whispered. He reached out his hand to caress my face, and threw his arms around me in the softest manner possible. You're so beautiful. As he said it, the rain started pouring. Neither of us moved. We couldn't hear the thunder crashing, see the lightning flashing, or feel the rain pounding. Our senses were entirely filled with each other. It felt like a dream. Oh Edward, I breathed, and then it happened. Our faces drew nearer and nearer, until finally our lips touched. Time stood still. The kiss was everything I never expected. It was pure, and real, and right. It was so charged with emotions that it almost overwhelmed me, but it didn't. It completed me. It was innocent, yet filled with desire. It was scary, yet comfortable. It was a need, yet a want all the same. I couldn't remember my name. I couldn't remember where I was. I couldn't remember what I had been doing up until now. I was completely and utterly absorbed in him. Lost in this blissful moment when all was right with the world, like a million little shining stars had all aligned perfectly into place. Our lips moved together in a synchronized rhythm as if they were made for each other. It lasted for a perfect 3 minutes until he pulled back. He looked me square in the eyes. Bella, are you okay with this? He asked nervously. I would have rolled my eyes had I not been so blissfully content, his breathing still jagged in my face. I responded to his question by throwing our lips together once more. He eagerly accepted my kiss and kissed me back, harder this time. We probably stayed there for 45 minutes, just making out. He planted kisses up and down my neck, and I did the same. He was so sweet about it though. So worried about my own pleasure, but manly enough to go for it. It was perfect. That was literally the only word that could accurately sum it up. We finally stopped kissing long enough to talk. He led me to a special spot that he told me he liked to go to think. It was the most beautiful meadow I had ever come across, and it meant even more to me that Edward shared such a special place with me. He leaned up against a tree, while I lay across his lap. It was the most peaceful position imaginable. Our fingers intertwined as we talked. So, Bella, about the kiss, I want you to know that I don't ever want to make you uncomfortable. If you want to take things slowly, that's fine with me. But I want to tell you that even though I've only known you for a few short days, I'm in love with you. I gasped. He picked up some RS out of the ground and placed them delicately in my hands while kissing my hand. I could see he was nervous. Bella, I know what love is supposed to feel like. I've seen it with my family members. And, it's the only thing that completely depicts what I feel for you. You're it for me. If you don't feel the same way, that's fine. But I need you to know how I feel. I'm never going to hurt you, or leave you. I'll respect you and treat you like the goddess you are to me. I love you. He looked at me apprehensively. I realized I had been silent during his whole speech. I didn't know quite how to follow words that beautiful. So I just said the only thing that I knew to be true in that exact moment. I love you too, Edward. Wow, never thought I'd say that. Especially after such a short time. But I see and he explained the undeniable pull I feel to him. I know it's love. He beamed at me. I love you, but I would like to take things slowly, if that's okay with you. He smiled warmly. Of course, my love. Anything for you. He paused and looked deeply into my eyes. So what would make you happy right now? I pretended to think it over, and then held up a finger as if I had just come up with the greatest idea. I think I'd like you to kiss me again. He grinned playfully. Is that so? And what if I refused? He said, even though his face was drawing nearer as he said it. Mischief filled my face. Well then I guess I'd have to do this. I then used my power to bring his lips to mine. He didn't seem to mind. When the storm was letting up, we grudgingly decided it was time to go back home. He carried me home, and we were halfway there when he got a text from Carlisle. It read, Edward, please bring Bella back soon. I think I've found adequate enough information to get her started on ultrasounds. He read the text to me, and then checked my face for my reaction. I was nervous. I was excited. I was terrified. I was thrilled. You ready for this, Isabella? He said in a very concerned voice. I nodded. I've been ready for a century. Let's do this. He laughed and carried me the rest of the way home. He set me down as we reached the door, which was almost immediately opened by one squealing Alice Cullen. We shushed her. We didn't want to tell everyone immediately. Lord knows what Daddy would do. She merely beamed at us, and we followed her into the house after one last kiss on the front porch. Carlisle was waiting for us in the living room. He quirked a brow at us as if he knew of our new status, but he didn't say anything. Bella, I assume Edward has told you that we're ready to do an ultrasound. I nodded. Good. Oh, but before I forget, I got this for you. He pulled a shiny black card out of his wallet. You're a part of this family now, so here is a card for you. There are unlimited funds. Don't ever worry about money again. He smiled warmly at me as my eyes bugged out of my head. So shall we get started? He led me to a table set up in a spare room, and tried to get rid of Edward. Don't you think Bella should have some privacy? Edward looked at me and said meaningfully, I'll go if you so desire. I smiled at my love. Edward can stay. Edward's face lit up the room and Carlisle merely chuckled. Okay Bella, if you could just lie down right there. I did as he asked, and then he lifted my shirt up just enough to expose my stomach. I looked at Edward, and his face held nothing but worry and concern. Carlisle then spread some weird, gel-like substance over my belly and got all his fancy medical equipment adjusted. A strange pulsing sound filled the room. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. It wasn't quite a human heartbeat, but it was a beat nonetheless. Proof that I wasn't crazy. My baby was alive. He moved his tools over my stomach in various ways, and then he got a picture on the monitor. I think I was smiling so brightly that my face cracked. I didn't care. I just couldn't believe this was happening. Could life seriously get any more perfect? Carlisle pointed around different angles of my baby. And I really tried to listen. I just couldn't process more in that moment other than the fact that I was looking at my baby. Do you see that there, Bella? Do you know what that means? He asked, unable to mask the evident joy in his voice. I shook my head. It means you were right. It's a girl. He smiled at me. Before I had the chance to vocalize my joy, Daddy burst into the room. It's a girl. I'm a grandfather to a baby girl for sure. He smiled breathlessly at Carlisle and I. It took him a minute to notice Edward in the room, who was smiling just as brightly. What is he doing here? He asked. Dad, can you just cool it for now? Just focus on your grandchild. Of course, Bella, I'm sorry sweetheart. He kissed my forehead and didn't mention Edward's presence the rest of the ultrasound. Carlisle talked in a lot of medical terms, so I really didn't get into all the details until he said the sentence I'd been waiting to hear. It looks like with some development, we might be able to deliver little Whitney Jasmine in about a month. Daddy, Edward, and I all shouted in joy. Pure, unrivaled joy. I was touched that Edward seemed to care so much about the baby. And I found myself wondering if he would take on a fatherly role to my child. I thought about all the things in life that would change in just a month. My baby, my miracle. My whole world would turn upside down once more. But I didn't want it any other way. What kind of development is necessary? Can we start now? I asked, ready to get started. Carlisle laughed. Well, she needs some more nutrients. I strongly suspect that drinking blood will supply those, but the problem is that the animal blood you've been living off of hasn't been doing the trick. Luckily, I have a surplus of human blood stored from the hospital. With rest and monitored progress, it should give her just what she needs to be born. And with that, I tuned out. My imagination carried me away into the joys of motherhood. Edwa, Rode and Dad both immediately peppered Carlisle with questions concerning my health and safety. It wasn't something I was concerned about. I was having a baby. It was all going to be okay. I honestly believed it. The rest of the night was rather eventful. After the ultrasound, Edward and I felt like we should let Daddy in on what was going on. I hated keeping secrets from him. We had all been sitting in the family room when Edward nonchalantly asked if he could have a word in private with Dad. I personally didn't see the point. It's not like we won't hear everything anyway. Hello. Vampires. Dad begrudgingly agreed, as he probably knew what was going to happen. Alice was squealing beside him, I was looking at the floor, and the rest of the family was just giggling. Edward pulled him into the kitchen, shut the door, and then the conversation commenced. I knew Edward was nervous, but it was very sweet of him to be this gentlemanly in asking my father for permission to date me. We all hushed down, and heard Edward begin to speak. Jasper, thank you for speaking to me. There's something I'd like to talk to you about. As you have probably felt, Bella and I feel very strongly towards each other. I know she's your only daughter and you love her very much, but I will take good care of her. I love her. Alice, Esme, and Rosalie all went, "Ah," in the girliest voices possible. Carlisle chuckled, and Emmett went straight to teasing me. I played my favorite game, pick a spot on the floor, and stare. I was quite good at it. Apparently, Daddy responded in his thoughts, because we soon heard Edward speaking once more. "I know that, Jasper, and I respect that. But you know me. When have I ever been involved with a girl? I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't confident in my emotions, which are something you should understand." He paused for another moment while Dad replied through his mind. It was pretty irritating, not knowing what he was saying. I'd have to ask Edward about it later. "Jasper, I give you my word. You will never see me hurt her. If I ever do, I personally give you my permission to rip me to pieces and burn my worthless carcass." He paused, and then laughed earnestly. "The rest of the family can even help you." Another minute or so passed, and Edward's voice seemed to soften. "I love her. We're taking it slowly, but there's no use denying what we all already know. I love her, and I will be whatever she wants me to be, whatever she needs me to be." There were about 3 minutes of silence before we heard Dad's voice for the first time. "Isabella, could you come in here?" he softly said. I quickly and nervously got up and walked to the kitchen, ignoring the cheering behind me. I stepped into the room, and tried my best to act confidently. Not that it mattered, seeing A.'s dad had the power to feel my emotions anyway. As if reading my mind, he looked at me tenderly. "Bella, don't be nervous. I'm not mad at you or anything." I exhaled, nodded, and looked up at him. "Now, as I assume you've heard, Edward here has proclaimed his love for you." I smiled, and even I could feel the love that reached my eyes at his name. "You have my permission to date, with a few rules." He looked at me and grinned. "You are my baby girl, after all. If I'm going to have to deal with you dating, I might as well have fun with it." I looked at Edward expectantly, and he returned my glance with one of encouragement, love, and devotion. "Rule 1. If he ever hurts you, and I mean ever, you will tell me and I will take care of it." "Dad," I muttered embarrassed. He ignored me. "Rule 2. You will help and respect Bella as she goes through this new phase of life as a mother. We all will, of course. But you will be playing a special role. Rule 3. Your physical relationship is limited, period. Lips on lips, hands on hands. Everything else is off limits." I fought the urge to roll my eyes. Whatever Dad. Edward, however, looked him square in the eyes and shook his hand. "Thank you, Jasper, for allowing me this chance to love Bella." He then looked at me and asked, "So Bella, would you do me the great honor of accompanying me tomorrow night to a movie and a walk in the park?" I once more heard choruses of awe. From the living room, my entire face lit up and I couldn't even feel Daddy in the room anymore. I placed my hand in his as I responded. "I would love to, Edward. Thank you." The door burst open, and in rushed Alice and Emmett. The rest of the family trailed after them at a more reasonable speed. I was embraced by 4 pairs of arms, and flooded by a million congratulations. After all the commotion had calmed down, Carlisle pulled me aside. "Bella, I have some blood and special vitamins ready. Are you ready to begin the process?" I eagerly nodded my head, and he led me into his study. It was much different from Dad's, but I liked it all the same. He handed me 2 cups. One was filled with a red liquid that was obviously blood, and human blood at that. It smelled beautiful. The other had some weird tablets in it. I looked at him questionably. Would I get sick or something from these? He quickly shot off into some medical explanation of why they were okay. I think it was because they were going to the baby. And not me. But I could be interpreting that incorrectly. Who knows? He told me I should take the tablets with the blood, and I quickly followed suit. The tablets didn't taste that great. But the blood was indescribable. The moment it was at my lips, it was like wine of the purest, sweetest kind. Apparently Whitney liked it too, because my stomach immediately started fluttering and tickling. "Oh," I exclaimed surprised, and looked down to laugh at my stomach. Carlisle looked fondly at me. "Is the baby moving?" I didn't respond, just placed his hand on my stomach. He smiled as the baby squirmed and danced under his touch. "We're all very happy for you, Bella. And we will all help raise this baby in the best way we can." That led me to a question that had been on my mind for a while. "Do you have any sort of idea what the baby will be like? I mean, it'll be half vampire, half human, right? Has that ever happened before?" He sighed and sat down at his desk, as he on for me to take a seat on the other side. "If it has, we have no record of it. Based on what we know right now, the baby has a heartbeat. It isn't as strong as a human's, but it probably isn't as necessary as a human's. The baby will also probably drink blood, but it is entirely possible that she may prefer human food. I wrinkled my nose. Human food? The smell of that would drive me crazy. He laughed at my expression. His face then turned serious, and he got to the point I had most feared discussing. As for the life expectancy, I would imagine it is a lot longer than a human. My theory is that she will live forever. Unless there are injuries or incidents that occur that might be deadly to a human. This, of course, is all theorization. We don't really know that much concrete information. Especially since you've been carrying her for such a long time. I absorbed that. So she had forever to live, as long as her life was sheltered from any danger possible. Would she resent that? I thanked Carlyle for the medical opinion. And then left the room. I almost went to my room, and then turned and headed instead for Edward's, where I knew he'd be. He was sitting in his bed, looking at the door like he was waiting on my arrival. He saw me and held out outstretched arms to me. I ran into them eagerly. How did it go with Carlyle? He asked softly while kissing my temple. I gave him all the details of the blood, the pills, and the discussion that followed. He asked if I was okay. Yes. I mean, I want her to have the best life possible. I'm glad I'm getting the chance to have her at all. We'll just have to wait and see what happens once she arrives. Then we talked for hours on end, just daydreaming about what our lives would be like. He held me in his arms as we discussed what his role would be. He asked my permission to take on the role of the father in her life, and I couldn't think of anyone I wanted to father my baby other than him. He would make such an adorable father. We talked and talked until the daylight shone, and then I went back to my room to prepare for school. Today there was another outfit with a note from Alice. Bella, I'm glad you got a boyfriend and everything out of yesterday. However, there are no excuses today. Put this on and we're going shopping after school. Love, Alice. I put on the outfit, but didn't go to her room for Bella Barbie time. I spent my spare minutes in Edward's embrace, dreaming of our child. Our child. What a nice sound that had to it. The next few days passed by slowly, yet quickly all the same. At school there was everything I expected: glares at my relationship with Edward, stupid teachers, stupid assignments. At home, I was quickly settling into my new home with the Cullens. Every day was a new adventure, and I was starting to feel more a part of the family. Things were also progressing quite quickly with Whitney. Carlyle had me drinking the blood and taking the medicine twice a day, and then he would perform an ultrasound. He said everything was steadily progressing as it should, and Whitney would arrive in 2 weeks. Edward continued to amaze me at his loving nature, and I fell deeper in love with him with every day that passed. He had also become steadily more worrying over me, and it was kind of cute, okay, really cute. I had never been happier in my entire life, and I had been alive for quite some time. Everything was wonderful, yet there was always this nagging feeling that it was all about to crash down on me, like it was all too good to be true. A wonderful dream that I would soon wake up from. Alice had been having visions. Nothing steady, just 2 vampires coming to visit. She couldn't make out their faces, names, or anything about them. Just that they were vampires, and they apparently were passing through at some point in the near future. When the visions first began, she approached Carlyle. He had assured all of us that they were probably harmless, and there was no reason to be worried. I still got nervous though. What if it were them? What if they had found me? Just when everything was going my way. I tried to keep my worries at the back of my mind though, when Daddy was around. If he sensed my fear, he'd get all defensive and protective. As would Edward, and it wouldn't do any good for 3 of us to be freaking out like that. So we went to school, lived our lives. W.E. had just gotten home from school on this fine day when it started to rain. As dreary as it could be, I loved the rain. It was beautiful. I almost just wanted to go run in it, so I did. I grabbed Edward's hand as he helped me out of the Volvo, and took off. I was thankful I hadn't ripped his arm out of its socket as I took him with me through the woods. We just ran together and laughed, and then we reached a very special spot. The spot where we had first kissed, when it was raining then as it was now. I stopped as I remembered that moment. Edward, I turned to face him. I know, and he kissed me right there, in our spot. Once more, the rain was not bothering us. We just felt each other, nothing but love and desire. The kiss deepened, and we grew more and more passionate. Things got heated, and I pushed myself closer to him. My senses were completely overtaken. I wanted nothing but to feel him, closer and closer. My body was throbbing in need. Isabella. I heard him moan my name against my lips as he moved down to my neck. He pulled me closer to his body, and I responded by wrapping my legs around his waist. I ran my hands through his now wet hair, and then up and down his back. I let out a few moans of my own. I didn't care that we had only been together a week. I didn't care that I had wanted to take things slowly. I wasn't thinking about James, or worried about him hurting me. Everything was just, Edward. I needed this, to be part of him. I don't know how, but he slowly broke the kiss. Bella, we need to be careful. I don't want to move too quickly for you. Ha, too quickly. All I wanted was him to kiss me again. I moved in to kiss him, and I was stopped short when his phone vibrated. He read the text, then looked up at me. The family likes to play baseball when it rains. Thunder is always our excuse. Apparently we're playing tonight. We should get back to the house to change. He smiled, then swept me up into his arms. With one last kiss on my temple, he ran us back to our house while I giggled in his embrace. We got back to the house, dried off, and I went into my room to find my new baseball uniform ready for me to put on, sitting on my bed. Shocking. I started to remove my current clothing when I heard Alice giggle. I jumped, startled. Hi Bella, have fun in the woods. She winked. Alice, what on earth are you doing in here? If my heart weren't already still, it would be after that. Oh, Bella, stop being so melodramatic, she said, with an ironically melodramatic hand gesture. Her face turned serious. Now there's a reason I'm in here. I have to talk to you about something. She took a deep breath before continuing. I've been getting clearer visions of our visitors. It's a woman with long curly red hair. A man with a blonde ponytail. They're looking for you. I froze. They were here. How long? I broke the silence with a quivering voice. Alice looked at me with sorry eyes for a minute or so before answering. They're planning on interrupting our baseball game tonight. They'll probably be here in about an hour. I frantically scrambled to change plans, but was having trouble forming full sentences. I couldn't fathom seeing them, or them hurting my loved ones. What if he found out I was planning on having my baby, and tried to hurt her? Well then let's not play, let's go somewhere, Bella. Alice cut me off. We're going to play baseball. But, no Bella, she sighed and put her hand on my shoulder out of comfort. I understand that in the past you've had to run. It's a fix, but it's a short-term fix. If you keep running, you'll always only be running. But now you have people that care about you. Don't worry about us being hurt, or the baby being hurt, or even you being hurt. We are going to take care of you. We're going to face this Pro Bowl and take care of those monsters for good. I was about to respond to Alice when the door was flung open by none other than my own personal haven, Edward. Even the anger currently painting his face wouldn't mess up the beauty that overcame it. Alice, I'm taking Bella away for the night. You guys tear up these monsters by the time we return tomorrow afternoon. Before Alice could even protest, I did for her. Edward, no. As I rejected his idea, his face contorted into confusion. Edward, believe me, that sounds great, going away with you for a night. And I don't want to be around them any more than you do. But as Alice just finished telling me, I'm not alone anymore. And I'm responsible for all of this. I'm going to face this. Bella, trust me, there's nothing I would like more than to personally rip them to shreds, bit by bit. But it isn't safe for you to be here, and I'm not letting you go anywhere alone. Then don't let me go alone. Let's stay here, together. We can handle them. I can do this if I know you're with me. Please Edward. He looked ready to argue more, but gave a hearty sigh when he saw my pleading expression. Okay, we'll stay, but if you get the slightest bit hurt I shut him up with a soft kiss on the lips. I would have prolonged the kiss, but Alice decided she'd had enough of the romance. Okay you two, get in your uniforms and meet the rest of the family outside in the field. Once we're all out there, I'll brief everyone on what the plans are. Got it. Edward and I both quickly nodded and I tried my hardest to put a brave face on. I was comforted by my new family, but still felt uneasy about putting them all in danger. Would I honestly be able to look James in the eye and not be overcome with terror? Would all of those nights spent in fear come rushing back to me, rendering me useless? Would I slip up and let my family get hurt? I managed to dress myself as all of these concerns flooded my mind. Eventually I found myself being firmly escorted to the baseball field by Edward. As soon as we reached the group of our waiting loved ones, however, I was taken into a different grasp. Daddy immediately reached for me and simply held me as Alice told the group when to expect them. Once Alice was finished, Carlisle spoke. He gave a touching speech on what it meant to protect family. If I could still cry, I would have been. I observed the faces of those surrounding me. Emmett, who always teases and lightens moods, was listening earnestly, or the most listening he was probably capable of, to every bit of instruction, ready to fight. As Carlisle finished, he said, "No one messes with my baby niece/sister. I smiled at him out of gratitude and he winked at me. Alice, my new stepmother, best friend, sister, was looking calm and confident, as if she didn't have a single worry about the outcome of the battle ahead. Esme, sweet motherly Esme, looked more concerned than the others, but only out of motherly love and affection. As all mothers worried, and as I knew I would worry over Whitney. Carlisle, the ever-intelligent and gentle, was giving words of encouragement to the family. Rosalie, as expected, looked fierce. She was ready to fight and wasn't going to let anything in her way. I then turned to look at Edward. Edward was already looking at me, and telling me with his eyes that he loved me. I mouthed the words back to him. As awful as the situation was, seeing him like this was kinda a turn on. No, Bella, not now. I tried not to giggle as my conscience told my lady parts to stop it. At last, I looked into Daddy, who was still holding me. His eyes met mine with a comfort that matched nothing. I felt totally and completely safe with my father. I recalled one incident when I was a little girl. I was 5 years old. Daddy and I were out on the porch together. I was about to fall out of my rocking chair when he swooped down and caught me. He pulled me into his arms and onto his lap. "Thank you for catching me, Daddy." He smiled at me and fondly caressed my cheek. "I'm always going to catch you when you fall, sweet Bella. That's what daddies are for. Even when you're all grown up." I had snuggled deeper into him as he said that. That same peace and security I remember feeling then, I felt in this moment. Even now, when I'm all grown up, Daddy was here. I looked up at him and quietly said, "Thank you." His face grew puzzled. "For what, Isabella?" "For being here, for being my dad. Always." He smiled through our moment and simply rubbed tiny circles into my back. I then watched as he gave careful instructions to everyone on the technicalities of fighting. I was strangely proud and amazed. He was a good man, my father was. And this was in his element. He knew what he was talking about, and I was proud to be his descendant. I was so took head by every single one of the Cullens' behavior that I hardly noticed when we heard the first crash of thunder. It was time to play some ball. I was up to bat and trying my hardest to focus on the game as Dad pitched me the ball. As it came hurling at me, I imagined it as the face of James. With the mental image, I successfully hit it harshly and ran my butt around the bases. Apparently, I did a good job. Before I knew it, I was back at home plate. I was acutely aware of Emmett's high fives as I watched Alice's face glaze over. "It's time," she said, and with those 2 words, she shifted the entire mood of everyone present. The family immediately assembled into their agreed positions, me being in the back. I felt bad being in the back, but I had been outvoted. So as they all shielded around me, we awaited the forthcoming of my nightmare. Edward had asked me why I was worried, seeing as my gift is mental manipulation. His theory made enough sense. Why couldn't I just think them away, and eventually they'd follow suit? Because my powers aren't forever. I could change someone's mind about a decision while they're making it, but I couldn't keep them away forever. Alice was right then. Kicking them away this time would only lead to having to do it again in the future. It was an agonizing 4 seconds before I caught a glimpse of James. The second I saw his evil grin, or smelled his sickening scent, I tensed. And as I tensed, Whitney started kicking, as if she knew something bad was happening and was growing restless. She had no idea that it was because I was about to take part in killing her own flesh and blood. That thought stopped me in my tracks. Could I do that to my child? Could I do away with the pathetic excuse of a man that gave her to me? He had put me through a lot, but he also gave me Whitney. And someday she would ask me about her father. What would I tell her? Would I say that Edward was her father? Would she believe that? Could I look into the eyes of my daughter and tell her I killed him? Would she ever forgive me? As I had been thinking through this moral dilemma, the others had taken action. Rosalie, Alice, and Esme were fighting Victoria while Edward, Emmett, Carlisle, and Daddy all fought off James, who was trying to get to me as I awkwardly stood there staring at him. I could tell he only had a few moments left unless I did something. Daddy and Edward were seething and weren't giving him any mercy. Before I could logically think through what I was doing, I yelled out a shocking, "Stop!" The guys instantly stopped their attack on James, but still held him in a vice grip. "Bella, this guy is finally getting what he deserves," said a confused Emmett. I looked James in the eyes as I loudly responded to their confused faces. "You're right, he does RVE death of the most excruciating nature. He's put me through hell, and there's nothing I want more than to see him go through what I went through." I paused and took a breath. But he is Whitney's father. If I let him die like this, could I ever tell her that with pride? Could I tell my daughter the fate of her dad? I looked at Daddy. "I know how important a father can be, Dad. Even when I thought you were gone, you had an enormous impact on my life. You're my daddy. You mean the world to me." In the middle of my monologue, I was interrupted by one very obnoxious James. "What exactly am I hearing, Bells? You still have that rotten baby? That's impossible. It can't be mine. You must have gotten pregnant by someone else, you ignorant whore." Daddy, Edward, and Emmett all became enraged and started to attack him again, but I mentally made them stop. James's words hurt, but this wasn't for me. This was for Whitney. "And why are you calling this douche here Daddy? Your father died, Bells. He went to war and someone killed him. Someone looked into his eyes and shot him. He probably deserved it too, the cocky bastard. Or have you forgotten that? It wouldn't surprise me. You never were very smart. But you always have been pretty." I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't stand him saying those things about my father. I lost it. "You will not talk about my daddy that way." And with that, I leapt towards him. My anger was so strong that I knocked him out of the arms of his captives. I ripped his arms out of their sockets. I tore his hair from his head and stuffed it down his throat. I pinched off his nipples and crushed them into dust. I ripped out every single eyelash individually and forced him to pull out his own teeth. Then I looked at his hands. Those hands that had slapped me, pushed me, touched me. The hands that broke my legs and tore into my intimate areas. The hands that made me feel worthless and dirty. Used and unwanted. I took those hands into mine and used them to rip his head from his body. Then I flung every single piece of him into the fire that was steadily burning Victoria's body. I stepped back and let out a tearless sob. I felt arms encircle me, but I didn't turn to see to whom they belonged. I just stared at the fire as it burned my past away. What did I just do? "Bella, are you okay my love? Way to go Bella, who knew you had it in you? Sweetheart, how are you feeling?" I heard all these comments and more from my family, but I couldn't really listen. I was too busy processing the scene that had just played out before me, and I was the lead role. Had I really just rid myself of James? Forever. Half of me was overjoyed. The weight lifted off my shoulders was immeasurable. The other half, however, was given a new burden to carry. Not for my own good, but Whitney's. I couldn't decide how I felt about taking away half of her DNA. She would have Edward, that I never doubted. She would even have Jasper, Emmett, and Carlisle. All of these men would make such wonderful fatherly figures in her life, and James never could have competed with that. But did he have a right to? Or maybe that right was stripped away the moment he denied her existence. I recalled the words he said to me all those years ago when I told him of my pregnancy. "A kid? Impossible." He had slapped me harshly across the face. "How could you have let this happen? How could you have been so irresponsible? Well, either way, I will be father to no child." These were his last words as he sunk his teeth into my skin. And then, not to forget the words he had just said to me, mere moments prior to this. "You still have that rotten baby. Impossible, impossible." I'm starting to believe nothing is impossible anymore these days. Mythical creatures. Check. Over a century worth of a pregnancy. Check. Mind control. Check. Finding daddy after all these years. Check, check, check. As his words resounded within me, there was only one thing I was believing to be impossible, that he deserved any kind of right to Whitney. What was I thinking? There was nothing safe about him. How dare I feel guilty for saving my child from someone who didn't want her? Someone who denied his own blood. Someone who would hurt her. As I stood there getting angry at myself, and justifying my actions, I started to focus on what the family was saying. "Is she okay? Her eyes look kinda glazed over. I'm sure she'll be fine. Let's just give her some space." I turned to face them, surprised to find I was still in the arms of my father. Edward was standing closely next to us, looking as if he wanted to be the one holding me, but understood I needed my dad. I had, after all, just killed someone defending him. I let myself melt into Daddy's embrace as he worriedly spoke. "Bella. Isabella, I know how you're feeling. You're shocked. We can understand that. But why are you feeling guilty? And baby, I'm so touched that you responded that way to what he said about me. But you really don't have to worry about me. I'm fine, I'm just worried about you. If something had happened to you. Dad, I cut him off from his fatherly rant. I knew it wasn't helping matters that he was feeling everyone's emotions. Nothing happened to me, Dad. I'm a little shaken up, but I'm not hurt. When I admitted to being shaken up, I felt his calming powers kick into gear. He went into soldier mode, protecting and fixing. I turned to the rest of the group. Carlisle and Esme stood near, watching with weary expressions. Rosalie and Emmett looked proud, as if it were all some action movie. Alice had a mixture of sincere care and extreme glee at the outcome. Edward was pinching the bridge of his nose, trying to calm himself down. After a nudge to Dad from me, Daddy quickly helped him in that department. I left Dad's arms to go into Edward's. I quickly kissed him and then let him hold me from behind while I talked to the rest of the group. Sorry about my little freak out, everyone. Pregnancy hormones are wild, huh? I awkwardly attempted a joke as I awaited reactions. Apparently I had nothing to worry about. Emmett ran up to me for a huge high five and away to go Belle. The rest of the family wasn't quite as flamboyant as Emmett, but the reactions had a positive consensus. Everyone seemed proud of how I stood up for family, and relieved that I could finally start a James-free chapter in life. Edward remained quiet. I wondered if maybe he was still a little shaken from seeing me attack someone like that. Did he fear me maybe? I didn't think he would, but I suppose it was possible. The way I killed him was pretty menacing. I made a mental note to ask him about it when we were back in private. Carlisle cleared his throat and announced that he wanted to perform an ultrasound on Whitney to make sure my action hadn't induced any trauma to her. So, we headed back to the house with a feeling of emotional weariness. I sincerely hoped for everyone's sake that Whitney was okay, because I didn't think the family could handle another big meltdown today. Everyone was so invested in her arrival. Edward had been trying to prepare himself to raise a child, Emmett had been planning out all sorts of games to teach her. Esme, Rosalie, and Alice had all been decorating a nursery for her, and filling it with the sweetest sentiments a baby could ask for. Daddy had been nervously excited about being a grandfather, and I was ecstatic. Being a mommy, finally seeing and cradling the child I've been carrying for all these years. What could be better? As we quickly made it to the house, Daddy, Edward, Carlisle, and myself all went into normal ultrasound routine. As Carlisle moved the instruments around my stomach, everything appeared normal. The only thing a little strange was that she was moving a lot more frantically than we were used to. I was feeling the effects of it too. I guess that was to be expected, considering all the moving around I had just put her through. We all sighed in relief as we realized she was okay. Carlisle was just about to wrap up the equipment when I felt one sharp particular kick from my little angel. I gasped in a brief moment of pain, but shooed the guys awa. Why when they all rushed to my side in concern. 1 minute later, however, I felt another sharp jab. Then another, and another. I looked at Carlisle and told him with my eyes what he already knew. As I held Daddy's hand in mine and Edward's in the other, we all processed what was happening. Something wasn't right. I heard them all talking in hushed tones. I could hear them, but I wasn't listening. I was in a state of pure shock. Something was wrong. No, that couldn't be right. She simply had to be okay. It was that easy. She had to be okay. But that didn't seem to be the way things were panning out. We have to deliver her now. Is Bella going to be okay? Is Whitney going to be okay? Carlisle, tell me what's going on with my daughter and grandchild, please. What can I do to help? Are you sure it has to be now? I snapped out of my shock. If I was going to have this baby, I was going to have to know what was going on. My voice broke their conversation. Carlisle, what's going on? Whitney appears to be experiencing a reaction to the stressful atmosphere we just came out of. No doubt you killing James had a toll on you, so this is now something she is reacting to. The stress has induced you into premature labor. It looks like this is happening tonight. Baby, tonight. Whitney, tonight. Those were the only words that went through my mind for the next hour. I couldn't feel a terrible nt of pain as Carlisle maneuvered around with his medical tools. I could only feel a heart of half worry, half bliss. I could also feel the strong hands of my father's on mine. I chose to have Edward leave the room. As much as I wanted him to be here for the birth, I didn't want this to be the first situation he saw my womanhood. I could tell he was disappointed, but he respected my wishes. I promised him that he could come in before the rest of the family as soon as we had her. Besides, I wanted this with my dad. I needed my parent with me as I became a parent myself. I would always need him. I would always be his little girl. But now his little girl would need his help with her little girl. It was comforting to have the one person who knew me better than anyone with me. And this was his grandchild, he had some rights. Okay Bella, are you ready to meet your daughter? I nodded eagerly at Carlisle's words, but my gleeful nod was soon interrupted by a pain only rivaled by the pain 1x. Periences while transitioning into vampirism. This is it, I did the only thing my body was telling me to do, I pushed. I don't know exactly what I pushed, but you better believe I pushed. It was the only way to relieve the pain. And soon, it was all worth it. I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Whitney's cries filled the room, and I could hardly believe what had just happened. I, a vampire, gave birth to a baby I carried for over 100 years. I held out my arms impatiently to Carlisle, who was cleaning her off. In a split second he was at my side, placing her ever so gently into my arms. My throat was overcome with tearless sobs as I stared into my daughter's face. Who knew love like this existed? She had my chocolate brown eyes from my human life, and my dark hair. But I was 3 to see a strong resemblance of Daddy. He was present in almost every striking feature of her perfect little face. Hi baby girl, welcome to the world, took you long enough to get here. I giggled softly as I caressed her blank-covered skin. It's okay baby, we have forever to make up for it. She stared at me with adoration and acknowledgement. I held her to me closely and looked up at Daddy for the first time. He, too, had been completely taken with his new little grandchild. His hand was raised to cover his mouth as it was open in awe. He finally broke his gaze from her to look at me. She's perfect, isn't she? Now you understand the undying love and devotion I've spent eternity feeling for you, Isabella. I smiled at him and said, she looks just like you Daddy. A true Whitlock. He beamed as I said this and he held out his arms, a silent plea to hold her. I granted him his wish, but first leaned in and gave my baby a tender kiss on the nose. Love, confusion, adoration, bravery, more love. All of those emotions flooded into me, but I was confused. What just happened? As soon as I lifted my lips from her skin, the emotions faded. I curiously placed a finger on her bare skin. The same emotions filled my soul. Only this time there was a hint of amusement. I looked towards Carlisle, who until this moment I had forgotten was in the room. He looked at me knowingly. First off, congratulations on a beautiful and healthy baby girl. I was waiting for you to touch her bare skin and notice what I felt when I touched her. I have a theory. I nodded at him, so he proceeded. Of course, this is only based off of the 3 seconds I held her. However, I am thinking maybe this is her gift. With the combination of Jasper's empathetic gift and your gift of mental manipulation, maybe her gift is to make you feel the emotions she feels by means of physical contact. I beamed back down at Whitney. I was filled with pride at her inheritance of even more of her ancestry than we thought at first. I remembered Daddy had no idea what we were talking about, since I had yet to hand her to him. I placed her in his arms, and he gasped. I hadn't been sure if her gift would affect him, since he already felt all of our emotions anyway. Whitney cooed and squealed in his arms, and I could already see a very special bond being formed by the two. Oh how I wished vampires could cry, because heaven knows I'd be a weeping mess of happiness. This is amazing, Daddy simply stated. I asked what effect he was feeling, and he answered in awe. As I touch her, I feel no other emotions than the ones she feels. And they are undeniably strong. This is unquestionably her gift. I stalled a few more moments before I called Edward into the room. I wanted to take in this perfect picture. My father holding my flawless daughter in his arms as we all absorbed her talent, Carlisle and I looking lovingly in their direction. I called Edward in, and took a deep breath. This was the beginning of our lives. We heard Edward's anxious yet gentle steps into the room as he came in to meet Whitney. The second he could see her, his face lit up. Oh, Bella, he trailed off with outstretched hands to hold her. When she was placed in his arms, he couldn't look anywhere else for a solid 5 minutes. Whitney was clearly already fond of him, and had him wrapped around her tiny little finger. Everyone in the room saw a very special bond forming. I hoped it would be a bond that would someday resemble the one I had with my father. Because that's just what Edward would be, her father. Edward was of course aware of her gift, from both holding her and reading the minds of Carlisle and Daddy. This seemed to be another reason he was so awed by her new life. After moments of watching them preciously meet, I decided to speak up. Edward, love, as much as I love seeing you hold her, would you mind if I held her again? He readily agreed, though disappointed, and Whitney willingly came back into my arms as I cradled her adoringly. Okay, the rest of the family can come in now. I was struck as they all poured in, oohing and awing over Whitney, at the words I had just spoken so easily. The family, our family, that's what this was, and Whitney was just making my place in the family more complete. They all had differing, yet similar reactions to the precious baby in my arms. Esme simply dry cried, and kept shakily saying things like, "Oh, what a blessing, or she's so precious. Congratulations Bella." I deeply appreciated her response, because I knew it would be what my mother would be doing if she were here. I looked over towards Daddy as that thought came to mind. Did he ever think of Mama? Did he ever miss her? Did he regret marrying her now that he had Alice? Would she be proud of me, or sad that I was with him and she wasn't? He looked over and made eye contact, confused by what my face must have looked like. I shook my head, signaling it was a conversation to have later. Emmett was being pretty adorable, not knowing exactly how to act around a baby. He was trying so hard to be gentle, which was an amusing concept for him. He also looked to be extremely protective over her already. Not in the fatherly way that Edward or even Daddy was, but in an uncle type of way. I knew my baby would be the safest, most well taken care of child in history with those three around. I knew Emmett was technically an uncle to me, but I couldn't think of him that way all the time. He was much more of a brother figure to me, and that made Whitney truly his niece. Rosalie looked to be having mixed emotions. I knew she had always wanted a child of her own, and I sensed the sadness that this might have brought to her. I recalled a conversation I had with her a few days prior to the birth. "Hey, Rose, can you come in for a sec?" I called as she walked past my open bedroom door. She hesitated, then agreed. Sitting next to me on my bed, she nodded. "What's up Bella? I just wanted to talk to you about something. I know your story. I know how deeply you wish you could have a child." At my words, Rose ducked her head down low. "Listen Bella, I'm happy for you. You don't have to feel sorry for me." I shook my head in protest. "This isn't about pity." I reached out and placed a hand on hers. "I know how good of a mother you would be. And I know I'm going to have moments with my daughter that I don't know what to do. Which is why, if it's okay with you, I'd like you to be her godmother." She looked up at me and smiled brightly. "Are you sure? I mean, what about Esme or Alice?" "Esme and Alice will be wonderful figures in her life. Esme will be the warm presence that she is to all of us, and Alice will be a fun best friend for her. But I want you to be her godmother. Please, Rosalie, it would mean the world to Edward and I both." "You've talked to Edward about this?" "Yes, and we both agreed that you are the woman for the job." "What do you say?" She stood up, squealed, and pulled me into her arms. "Of course. Thank you so much Bella. I promise you, I will not let you down." I was drawn out of my flashback when I caught a beautiful smile forming on Rose's face. She winked at me and I watched as she held Whitney so tenderly and full of love. Alice's reaction was also special, in a very Alice way. She was flitting about the room, unable to contain her excitement at the moment. I could hardly guess all the things she was planning for my new baby. And I was actually pretty okay with that. I looked back towards Edward, who was still following Whitney with his eyes everywhere she was passed around the room. I reached out and squeezed his hand, which he responded to by kissing me gently on the forehead and sitting next to me on the bed. We could have stayed like that for hours, watching our family hold her and beam with pride. In fact, I'm pretty sure we did. I had all I ever needed right here with me. My family, my love, my daughter, what more could a vampire need? That was when Alice got the vision. Daddy started trying to snap Alice out of the state she was in post-vision. "Alice, Alice, what did you see? Come on, is everything okay?" After he pulled her close to him, her eyes finally deglazed themselves. It was strange, seeing him console another woman like this. I had obviously known of their strong love, but I wasn't used to seeing it displayed. From the short amount of time I had been with the Cullens, I had observed their relationship to be a very calm one. Intense and emotional, but in a quieter way. Alice looked up from my father's arms and looked straight at me before shaking her head. "It was nothing, just something about a shopping trip in our very near future." She tried to pass it off with a gleeful smile, but it was clear to all of us that she was lying. I made a mental note to ask her about it later, but then focused my attention back on Whitney. If it was important enough, Alice would tell us. Right, after tending to Whitney more for the next few hours, the family star. Ted moving back to their respective places in the home. Only Edward, Daddy and I stayed where we were, with Whitney. As I felt her playing with my hair, tugging and caressing, I looked up at the two men with me. These two men meant the absolute world to me. They each represented such different parts of my life, and they each held equal parts of my heart. And yet here they were, together, sharing this blissful moment with me. It was then that Dad turned to Edward. You need to hunt. It wasn't a question. Edward shook his head. I can handle it. Edward, I can feel your thirst. Edward opened his mouth to protest, but Dad cut him off. While I admit that you have exceptional self-control, I will not allow you to risk losing it around my grandchild. I doubt that is something you want to take a chance on either. Go hunt. The girls will be here when you get back. Edward turned to look at me, and I nodded. I trust you, Edward, but you do need to hunt if you're thirsty. He simply ducked his head in defeat and kissed me tenderly before kissing Whitney on the forehead. I'll be back soon, my loves. And with that, he left. As we heard him exit the house and disappear into the woods, I missed him dearly. Whitney felt it too, as she pressed her hands to my face and allowed me to feel the sorrow she felt at not having Edward with her. It's okay, sweetie. Your daddy will be back soon, I promise. And I squeezed her little fingers lovingly. Oh, Bella, you have no idea how much joy it brings me to see you hold you child. I feel almost as wonderful as I did the day you were born. I had almost forgotten Daddy was in the room. He came to my side and took Edward's place. I looked up at him in pure joy and contentment. I was then reminded of some things I needed to talk to him about. Hey, Dad, can we talk about a few things? He looked at me with concern in his eyes and reached out for my hand. Of course, darlin'. What troubles you? Well, the first thing I wanted to ask you about was Alice's vision. Why did she lie? He smiled sadly at me. I don't know why she would do that, sugar. Maybe she's waiting for more developments before she tells us anything. I don't know. I can tell you that if she doesn't want to tell anyone, she's most likely blocking her thoughts from Edward, so he won't know either. He paused, then squeezed my hand. Don't worry, darlin'. It'll be okay. Did you say you had something else to ask me about? I looked down at Whitney before responding, unsure of how to word my question. Bella, why do you feel nervous? Does this have anything to do with the curiosity I could feel coming from you earlier? I nodded, and looked back up at him. I was just wondering. I trailed off and he nodded at me encouragingly. Don't get me wrong, Dad, I know you have Alice and everything. I was just wondering if you ever think about Mama. There was a brief silence before I heard him exhale softly. He was no longer looking at me. The look in his eyes was cloudy, as if he was lost in the memories. Bella, I loved your mother very much. I really did. How could I not when she gave me you? He turned back towards me. I never want you to doubt that I cared about her. And I still think about her from time to time. Before I knew you were alive, I worried. I worried about whether or not she had been able to care for you after my death. I wondered if she had ever found another love. Darlin', I never imagined that she would have let go of life like that. If I had known, I would have found some way to help you, I swear. He looked deep into my eyes, pleading with me to understand. I nodded. I know that, Daddy. Good. So to answer your question, yes, I think about her. She was a wonderful woman. I am eternally grateful to her, because she was the mother to my child. She gave me something no one else ever did. Something not even Alice can. My relationship with Alice is much stronger than it was with your mother, I cannot deny that. But even Alice has had to deal with the fact that she will always mean something to me, because she gave me you. Alice can't do that, but that doesn't change the fact that I love her more than anything, aside from you, of course, my angel. You, and now Whitney. And Alice understands that. I waited a few seconds of silence to answer him. I leaned into his arms, as I was still holding Whitney, and let him embrace both of us before simply saying, I'm glad you have Alice. And I'm glad I have you. After enjoying a few moments of this father-daughter tenderness, we noticed that Whitney had fallen asleep. I took the opportunity to get up and put her in her new cradle. We had previously set up a nursery for her, so everything was in order. After making sure she was all warm and tucked in, Dad and I joined the rest of the family in the living room. We talked and laughed for an hour or so until Alice slipped into another vision. This time, instead of letting her get by with the shopping trip story, Rose pressed for more information. Come on, Pixie. There's obviously something going on. Cut the crap and tell us. I chuckled at her blunt tongue. That was Rosalie for you. All of the family, except Edward who had yet to return from his hunting trip, looked to Alice ready to hear of her vision. She looked ready to protest, telling us, and then looked into Dad's eyes. She must have seen something in them to convince her to talk, because talk she did. Oh, sorry for worrying all of you. There's really nothing to be afraid of, it just might annoy Bella a little. She paused to look at me, and I quirked a brow expectantly. The Denalys are coming. I didn't say anything as the rest of the family reacted. I had no idea who they were or why they'd affect me, but as long as they were no threat to Whitney I didn't see a problem with it. The others didn't seem to have a problem with some visitors. Excuse me, but who are the Denalys, and should I be concerned? Carlisle took the opportunity to inform me. They are some dear friends of ours from Alaska. They are animal drinkers, like us. We visit them from time to time, and they do the same. I think you'll find them lovely. Yeah, kinda like Tanya finds something of Bella's lovely too. Emmett retorted under his breath. Rosalie snickered. I again responded by quirking my eyebrow in confusion. Well, see Bells, the thing about Tanya. Oh hush, let's let Edward fill her in on that part. He has a few days to do it. Alice said, cutting him off. I threw Dad a helpless look, searching for some sort of explanation. He simply kissed my forehead and said, this is something Edward will definitely want to tell you himself. He chucked, but take consolation in that I'm on your team. He winked. My team. I failed to see the meaning, and he knew it. Now, I had a new reason to look forward to Edward's arrival back home. I was in Whitney's room, rocking her to sleep and blissfully absorbing her presence when I heard what was quickly becoming my favorite thing downstairs. Edward had just walked into the house, and I heard him ask the family where Whitney and I were. I loved that he so automatically considered her when he considered me. I smiled to myself and to my dot. When he asked them if they thought I'd mind him intruding on the mother-daughter bonding time. I decided to answer him myself before he overthought the situation. Come on up, Edward. I said at a normal level. He appeared at the door within mere seconds. Upon arrival, he stood there and looked at me in pure adoration. I motioned him over to me, since I didn't want to get up myself and startle Whitney. He bent down and gave me a tender kiss, appropriate for the infant in the room. Hello, my loves. I missed you. We missed you too. I allowed myself to be sucked into the spell his eyes put me under. Just content to stay in that moment forever. That is, until I remembered my conversation with the family that transpired an hour earlier. So Edward, Alice tells me we have some visitors coming. Oh, he looked concerned immediately, ready to take down any potential threat to his loved ones. Don't worry, sweetheart, no more crazed vampires out there looking to hurt me. Carlisle said they were your friends the Denalys. Oh, he said again, sounding satisfied yet not completely thrilled. Alice seemed to think their presence might annoy me. Well, actually, they all seemed to think their presence might annoy me, I said. Thinking back to Emmett's wisecrack. Care to elaborate? He pouted his lips, and then flashed me a brilliantly dazzling smile that he knew I loved. No reason at all. He leaned in to kiss me again. And I probably would have let him if not for my admirable stubborn nature. I simply stood and moved to place Whitney in her cradle, then turned to face him. Wanna try that again? He ran a hand through his hair, and wisely figured that I wasn't going to let this go. Bella, you are my first and my last. My heart is yours, and it has never been anyone else's. Not even mine, for it was never mine to give away. It's always been waiting for you to come to me, so it could meet its rightful owner. I nodded, flattered but confused as to why he was telling me this. That being said, there have been a few women in life who have shown interest. Tanya Denali, a member of this coven, is one of them. But Tanya is a decent woman, and once she learns I've found a mate I am sure she will be happy for me. For us, he said, kissing my hand. Oh, I muttered, stealing his line. I don't know why I was surprised it made sense. He was devastatingly beautiful. Of course women would show interest in a man so easy to get along with, as well as easy to look at. If she's so kind, then why was the family so sure that she'll be a thorn in my side? Well, the thing with Tanya is that, she's a little more persistent than others. I think she's always been convinced that one day I'll see the light and fall into her arms. But you need to know that that isn't true. I love you with my whole heart. And no one else will ever catch my eye. Persistent. Be honest with me, Edward. Is she going to be a problem? I was mentally preparing myself to enlist the girls as my army for detonating the pretty bomb. She is nothing you need to worry about. Edward insisted. Is she pretty? I asked, knowing it was petty but still needing reassurance. She's attractive, the way all of us are attractive, I suppose. But she could never do to me what you do. For example, she could never make me want to do this, he trailed off, and kissed the side of my neck. Or, this, he pressed his lips to my jaw, and I tried not to moan in anticipation. Especially not this, and with that, our lips were entangled. Enjoying the tango our tongues were performing, I could have stayed like that for hours. Yet I was reminded by Whitney's loud intake of breath that we were not alone. I pulled back, and smiled to him while I whispered, "Then I guess it's okay." He chuckled, and I added, "Besides, if she gets too handsy, I have a few tricks up my sleeve." I tapped my head a few times, reminding him of my manipulation power. "Yes, love, I remember, although sometimes I wish you didn't." He turned his face away, ashamed. I furrowed my eyebrows in confusion. "What do you mean by that?" He looked at me once with a bothered and somewhat helpless expression before once again looking to the floor and placing Whitney back in her crib. Bella, you have to understand that in my time, the man was the protector. I love that you're so independent and strong, but I wish that sometimes you needed me more." I opened my mouth to speak but he continued talking. "I understand that it's the 21st century, and your powers will no doubt come in handy sometime. But Bella, you have to know I will always need to keep you safe. Don't forget to let me help you sometimes," he added with a quiet smile. Edward, I couldn't find the words to tell him how much I wanted to trust him, how much I loved him. "What, Bella, please," he trailed off, bringing his lips to mine. The kiss was passionate, yet timid. Urgent, yet patient. He was pleading with me to be open with him. He pulled away quicker than I would have liked. "Let me be your shelter," he said, still inches away from my face. "Just tell me what you're thinking." I don't know if it was the look in his eyes, or his breath still so close to my face. But when he said that, the floodgates opened. I poured out my every reservation, every fear at vampire speed. "I want to trust you, Edward. Believe me, I do. Because I love you with every fiber of my dead soul. My unbeating heart, it's all yours. Surely you must know that. I love you. But I don't know if I can bring myself to depend on a man for everything. I've been alone for so long now. Whitney has been my only companion for a century. I need you to understand that. I depended on James for everything, Edward. He came in at a vulnerable time in my life, and he provided for me. I didn't know that it was wrong to trust him so completely, I just did. I know that you aren't James, I know you're a million times the man he could ever dream of being. But I can't help it, I naturally have to be careful about it. Especially now that I have Whitney to worry about." I walked up to him and wished away his pained expression. "I'll work on it, I promise. I just need you to be patient about it. Because I will always, always without a doubt need you." My voice grew quiet. "Okay." It took Edward moments to look up into my eyes again. "Okay, whatever you need, that's what I'll be. In time, you'll see how much I love you." And he once more reclosed the distance between our mouths. This time, the kiss was deeper. Less reserved, more urgent. We continued to increase in passion until I realized we were up against the wall, my body the only thing separating him and the structure. Our breathing quickened, and my hands had just slid under his shirt when I heard him chuckle. He pulled away and I frowned. "Hey, I wasn't finished with you yet," I claimed, pouting, "and I promise I will let you finish. But not here." I looked around and realized we were still in Whitney's nursery. Oops, poor kid could wake up and see Edward and me in a compromising position. That would take some explaining years down the road. Which compromising positions would she catch us in? I let my mind get carried away, and then I had to quickly stop myself when Edward asked what I was thinking. I looked him dead in the eyes, winked, and kissed his cheek. Then I walked to the door and looked over my shoulder as I left with a simple answer. "Not here, Bella." Emmett's voice rang loudly from downstairs as Edward and I pulled away from each other, as irritated as two sexually frustrated vampires could possibly be. Whitney was napping, and we took the RT Unity to educate ourselves on each other's anatomy. I sighed. "Yes, Emmett," I replied in a tone barely above a whisper. No matter how often we reminded him that shouting wasn't necessary, he held on to driving us all nuts with the volume. "I have another idea for how to annoy Tanya." Edward quirked a brow at me and awaited my response. "Emmett, I have already told you at least 80 times that I am not interested in tormenting the poor girl. She's already going to be irritated enough that I'm with Edward. I don't need to play any games, because I've already won. Now leave me alone." After my little speech, Edward and I resumed playing a game. I was much more interested in tonsil hockey. However, Emmett was not to be ignored. A loud knock at my bedroom door alerted us to his presence, once more interrupting our new favorite sport. "Geez, get a room." I could practically hear Edward rolling his eyes as he replied, "Geez. Get out of our room." I sighed yet again, exasperated to the point of defeat. I would say whatever was necessary to Emmett in order to get him out of the room. My mind and body were both still heavily distracted after the past hour of activity with Edward. We had yet to go all the way. Because apparently he hasn't registered yet that it is in fact the 21st century. But we had found plenty of ways to be creative, yet keep our virtue intact. Well, his virtue anyways. James had taken that privilege away from me with his cruelty, and Edward earnestly tried to convince me it didn't count, but I knew the truth. I was no longer a virgin, and that couldn't be denied. Yet I could do everything in my power to be as new and pure for Edward as possible. If that meant waiting a little longer for him, I was okay with it. I felt his arm wrap around my waist, and looked down to observe his perfectly sculpted muscles. On second thought, "Bella, stop oogling Edward and please just hear me out." "Fine, Emmett." I gave him half of my attention, which was pretty impressive considering the work Edward's lips were doing to my neck at the moment. He smirked. "So I found this bottle of hair dye from a phase Alice went through a few years ago." "No, you didn't even let me finish. Emmett, I have not met Tanya yet and I don't feel the need to ruin her life as a first impression. This is Carlisle's home and I won't disrespect him by disrespecting his guests. Unless she gives me a reason to hate her, I won't." End of story. Wait, so you're saying that if she gets too comfortable with Eddie over here, then you're open to the possibilities? He said with a mischievous smile. Hold on, too late. He ran out of the room and didn't give me a chance to tell him to stay out of things. I leaned back into Edward's arms, on his bed, and rolled my eyes. Now where were we? I smiled. I believe I was right. I moved so I was straddling his lap, and pressed my lips against his jaw. Here. Bella, that feels so good. I worked my way up and down his neck, and occasionally nibbled up to his ear. I could feel a situation rising in his pants, and it was matched by wetness pooling between my legs. Oh Edward, he had just led me down on my back when we were once again interrupted. For love of I looked up into the seething eyes of my father. Hi Daddy, I gave him my best innocent smile. Hello Isabella. Edward, could I speak to you in the hall? Why he decided to speak in the hall was beyond me. Because we all knew everyone would be able to hear the conversation anyways. But what do I know? I looked over to Edward, who was nervously unwrapping himself from my body. As he turned his back to walk towards Dad, I gave my overprotective father an annoyed glance. As they entered the hallway and closed the bedroom door, I propped myself up against Edward's headboard and closed my eyes. Waiting to hear Dad's reenactment of the Spanish Inquisition. Would you care to explain what you were just doing to my little girl? I rolled my eyes. He was so dramatic sometimes. Well Jasper, don't Jasper me. Right now we are not brothers. Right now we are discussing how you treat my daughter, and you will call me Major Whitlock. My jaw dropped, and I was torn between laughing at Dad and crying for Edward. Something funny, Isabella? I heard Dad angrily ask. Crap, stupid empath father. Edward seemed to regain his composure. Of course, Major Whitlock. I am very sorry if it at all appears that I have disrespected Bella Isabella. I would never knowingly cause her harm of any kind. My heart melted. He was such a perfect gentleman. I was cut short from my daydream when I heard Dad's response. When I feel emotions of such anxiety coming from my daughter, and upon investigation find your hands on her, I think my anger is a bit justified. I could hear venom dripping from every syllable he uttered. Okay, time to intervene. I got of the bed, and pushed myself into the hallway to find Dad cornering Edward up against the wall, with a look of pure monstrosity consuming his otherwise handsome face. Geez, someone's a little stuck in soldier mode. Dad, stop torturing Edward. He looked at me incredulously. How can you defend him after what he was just doing to you? By doing to me, you mean engaging in completely healthy physical activity for two people in a relationship. If it's so healthy, then why were you projecting such anxiety? Dad, please don't make me say this to you, I stuttered with embarrassment. No Bella, was I hurting you? I widened my eyes at Edward's concerned question. Did he really not know what he was doing to me? Boys are so oblivious. Isabella, I'm waiting. Do not hide things from me. Fine, I was projecting anxiety because Edward had me turned on. There, are you happy? I was basically soaking through my panties. I could barely hear the snickers from Emmett downstairs as I looked at Dad, who was just as mortified as myself. I couldn't even bring myself to look at Edward. After a few of the longest seconds of my life, Dad conceded. Okay. Well, I'm just gonna go hunt. And with that, he disappeared. I looked down to the floor, waiting for Edward's awkward reaction to what he had just witnessed. To my surprise, it never came. I simply felt him approach from behind me, and nuzzling himself into my hair. Then he spun me around, and lifted my head to his. I did that to you. I faintly smiled, and took a shaky, unneeded breath. Yes. As soon as the words slipped from my mouth, I was being carried to the bed as quickly as it had happened. His mouth devoured mine, and I wrapped my legs around his waist as he set us down carefully. I longed to be closer. I could feel his hardening length prominently through the materials that separated us, and I needed to be closer to him. I started grinding my hips, desperate to create some sort of friction. He responded enthusiastically, and soon enough we were dry humping like the hormonal teenage vampires we were. I was just about to be completely overwhelmed in reaching a climax when I heard the only thing in the world that could have pulled me from this moment: my daughter's cry. I heard the doorbell ring downstairs as Alice finished with my hair. I couldn't understand why she insisted on a full makeover, but the fuss she made was giving me anxiety over our guests. I didn't feel threatened by Tanya or any other woman in the world until Alice made it her goal to make me look as glamorous as possible. Was Tanya so beautiful that I had to look my absolute best to convince her I was a match for Edward? Was she someone I would have to compete with? I was pulled out of my thoughts by the chorus of greetings sounding from the living room, alerting me that it was time to go meet the woman trying to take my man away. Alice had already left to go play hostess, and I took a moment to look at myself in the mirror, observing her creation before making an appearance. Okay, Bella, you can do this. You have no reason to be nervous. While I sat there trying to calm myself down, I heard Dad approach. Bells. Hey Dad. He came up behind me and softly touched my hair. I looked up at him to see his warm, sympathetic and fatherly gaze. I immediately felt loved and comforted. Baby, you look beautiful. Why do I feel such nervousness and inadequacy coming from you? I looked down, somewhat ashamed of myself. It's nothing, really. I wasn't nervous about meeting Tanya until Alice insisted on making me over. Is Tanya that extraordinary? Edward had always made me feel so beautiful in our time together that I never worried about another woman. But I was starting to question that with the fuss everyone kept making. With Emmett constantly trying to prepare for my hatred of Tanya, Alice playing Bella Barbie relentlessly, and even the way Rosalie insisted on taking Whitney on a special godmother bonding outing today so I could get ready, it was all getting to be a little much. Daddy sat next to me on the bench facing the mirror in the master bathroom he shared with Alice, and carefully put his arm around my shoulders to pull me closer to him. Sweetheart, do you really think I would let you be involved with Edward if I ever thought for 1 second if I thought he would have eyes for anyone else? I giggled softly into his chest. And look at yourself. He raised my head to look at my reflection. You're absolutely breathtaking, baby. You have your mother's heartwarming smile, and so many features that have made you beautiful since the day you were born. I strained my eyes, trying to see what he was seeing. But more than that, more than being beautiful, you're the strongest woman I've ever met. You've been through so much, and yet you've managed to let us all in. I was nervous when I heard your story, because I knew you might not want to embrace a large new group of people after being hurt so badly. But you've taken it all and made the best of it, and given us all 2 very precious gifts, you and Whitney. You're a wonderful mother, daughter, companion, and sister. After all you've been through and been able to handle, Tanya will be a piece of cake. Don't let her scare you. You've overcome so much more. My heart completely melted. It meant so much to me that he seemed to understand the battles I have fought for so long by myself, always aching for the comfort of a father. I smiled, and I would have been crying if possible at his heartwarming speech. Besides, if Tanya gives you any problems, this southern father has no problems protecting his baby girl. Did you know they used to call me the god of war? He said with a cocky smile. I rolled my eyes, but smiled at him anyways. Of course they did, Dad. I'm sure you were very deserving in the title, and I'm sure you handled it with complete humility. I gave him a nod of mock affirmation, while secretly trying to hide how impressed I was. God of war, man, my daddy is good. Of course I did. What do you say, Isabella? Ready to go meet this little girl we call Tanya? I nodded, took his hand, and let him lead me out of the room after one last glance in the mirror. I could see it now. I was ready. We got downstairs, and that's when I got my first eyeful of the woman I was determined not to hate. She was tall, slender, and sported a trophy of long strawberry blonde hair. Her pale skin was just as beautiful as every other vampire's, but that's not what caught me. Her face was illuminated by elegant makeup, and she was overall a beautiful woman. But her eyes held a certain determination that caught me off guard. It was as if she was looking for a target, a prey amongst friends. I swallowed, mustering up my courage. Daddy squeezed my hand, and I felt waves of extra courage being sent my way. I squeezed his hand back in appreciation before clearing my throat to announce my presence. Tanya turned around from her place in the living room, where she had been catching up with Alice and Emmett. Hello there. You must be Bella. Alice and Emmett were just telling me that Jasper found his long-lost daughter. How exciting, she said with what seemed to be genuine enthusiasm. Maybe she didn't know about Edward and I. Maybe I could make a good first impression before she found that part out. Yes, and not only has he completed the family as Jasper's daughter, but she has also taken her place as Edward's mate. Emmett added, oblivious to the plan I had just concocted. I tried not to be irritated with him. I watched as Tanya's face contorted while she absorbed this information. I felt Dad start to come to my rescue and say something, but I jumped in before he could. It was time to be a grown woman. Yes, guilty as charged. Hi Tanya, it is very nice to meet you. Where is your family? I swept over to shake her hand, determined to make the best impression I could, and not show any signs of weakness. She can probably smell fear. What was wrong with me? This woman was not a threat to my relationship, yet. Oh, how wonderful that you've settled into the family so nicely. I had no idea that Edward had taken another lover. My mistake. At this, I saw all members of my new coven narrow their eyes. That has to be a lie, right? She continued, oblivious to the anger her words had just provoked. As for my family, they opted out of the trip. There was a situation that arose in Alaska, but I just couldn't miss the chance to come see my friends. She made the error quickly, but loudly enough that we all caught it. Where is the rest of the family? I've missed Edward so much. He has always been a dear friend to me. And of course Esme and Carlisle as well. Dad jumped in. As thrilled as we are to see you, Tanya. Those three have unfortunately taken an extended hunting trip and we do not know when they will be back. Rosalie is out for the day. It had taken all my willpower to convince Edward to go. He needed to hunt, and this would be a good way to move Tanya out of the house a little quicker. Of course, he did not want to leave me to deal with her alone, so we made a deal that he could come back and see me every night at midnight. When Alice had agreed to keep Tanya distracted. The trip was only supposed to last 3 days, but we weren't going to clue her in on that. I also noticed how Dad omitted the part about Whitney. And I was thankful. It was for the best that I know what I am up against before bringing my daughter into the equation. That's all right. I can stay as long as I need to. I tried not to let my smile falter as I realized she wasn't planning on leaving without seeing Edward. How strong you must be to be apart from Edward for an undefined amount of time. Most mates I know can barely stand to be apart for more than an hour. It's nice that you aren't codependent, refreshing. She added, with a sickly sweet smile. What was she getting at? Was she somehow insinuating that my relationship wasn't as strong as others? Of course I missed Edward. I missed him with every aching moment that he wasn't at my side. Relax Bella, don't let her get to you. I looked over and saw Dad focusing on sending me waves of confidence and peace. It's very sweet of you to see it that way, but on the contrary. We practically had to be pried away from each other. It's pretty annoying for my of a father to deal with his baby girl constantly emitting lust and passion, but I can't help it. He's just so, well, you've seen Edward. I'm sure you can imagine. I added with a wink. Dad looked at me with shock. Probably uncomfortable with the direction I had taken things yet secretly proud of me for putting her in his place. Alice giggled to herself, and Emmett sent me a not-so-discreet thumbs up. Tanya didn't seem to appreciate it as much. Oh, well, yes. I can certainly imagine why that would be a problem for you. Well, if you could excuse me for a moment, I need to call my sister and let her know I made it here safely. She awkwardly stepped outside, and I visibly relaxed. I already couldn't wait for this visit to be over. Quiet cheers erupted from my family members. Atta girl Bella, who knew you had that in you? My baby niece kicks butt. That was brilliant, Bella, and your outfit was perfect for that kind of confrontation. Well done, darling. She was radiating discomfort and awkwardness. But must you constantly throw in my face your attraction to Edward? I laughed at Dad and stuck my tongue out at him before exhaustedly saying, guys, how long is she staying? That was tiring and it took all of 5 minutes. No kidding, Bells. She was just telling Emmett and I before you came down that she feels she's ready for a relationship now, and she was hoping to make a connection on this trip. It didn't need to be said that she was referring to Edward. She seemed pretty determined. Dad nodded. Alice is right, Bella. She likely will not back down until she sees that Edward is completely obsessed with you. I felt her motivation the moment she stepped into the house. I sighed. Emmett, where did you say that hair dye was? This was getting ridiculous. Tanya had only been here for 15 hours. And it was already 15 hours too long. After her little let me step outside a moment earlier, she had come back in more determined than ever to steal my man. She stepped back into the house and said, well, I'll go take my stuff up to Edward's room, if that's okay, just like old times. Of course, I knew it wasn't true. Edward, along with the rest of the Cullens, had assured me time and time again that I was the only woman to ever catch his eye. But it didn't make it fun to hear anyhow. I kept telling myself to be the bigger woman. I've dealt with a lot worse than Tanya before. And for crying out loud, I'm a mother. I should be able to handle this maturely. Right, I rolled my eyes at the memory from this morning and checked the clock. 11:52, 8 minutes until Edward would come along and save me from this torture. I've never been one to play the damsel in distress card, but there's a first for everything. And hey, who's playing? I grabbed my phone, and quickly composed a text to Alice. Of course by the time I had typed it out, she had beaten me to it. Bella, don't worry, breathe, I know it's unnecessary but sometimes it helps. Trust me. Winking face, in 7 minutes, Tanya and I are leaving. I told her there was a sale going on at a special boutique in Seattle only at midnight. That girl will fall for anything. You will have 1 hour with Edward, and no more. Be careful and have fun. Peas, I got you an outfit for the occasion. Check your closet and enjoy. I rolled my eyes, but did a silent thank you to the heavens for sending Alice into my life. I needed Edward. I missed Whitney as well. But Rose and I thought it was for the best for her to keep my daughter away while Tanya was here. No need to give her any ammunition. My baby girl was off limits. She wasn't much of a baby anymore, though. Whitney had grown into a toddler, and the quick speed of it broke my heart a little. For so long, she had been the same size in my womb. Now she's out and living her life in Sioux, rounded by people who love her, and I'm so thankful for that. But I do wish she'd just be my little baby forever. The day before, I mentioned my feelings to Daddy. He simply wrapped an arm around me, kissed my cheek, and said, now you know why I'll always call you my baby girl. I stood up and opened my closet to follow Alice's instructions. There, as promised, was a scanty and lacy black number hanging proudly with a note. Tell Edward to be careful with how he handles it. I have a feeling you'll like this one. If I were still human, I'd have felt my face turn 50 shades of red. I didn't know what to think of the little garment. Of course, I wanted Edward that way, but would he want me? He was always so gentlemanly. The idea might totally turn him off. However, with little time to dwell on the matter, I threw caution to the wind and changed into my new costume. I sent Alice a quick appreciation text, and positioned myself on the bed. 11:59. He was so close, I could feel him. My dead heart jumped a little. I was so focused on his arrival that the tap on my window caught me off guard. I motioned my finger excitedly at him to come in, as the window was already unlocked. I could feel my face break out into the world's largest smile, and I didn't try to stop it. As he stepped into the dimly lit room, I leapt off of the bed and into his arms. Edward, I began placing small kisses up and down his throat while he softly chuckled. I missed you too, baby. He looked down at me and froze. Bella, what are you, wearing? I flashed him a coy grin and did a little spin for his viewing pleasure. All thoughts of Tanya forgotten in my bliss. Do you like it? It's just something I thought I'd try on. He groaned, though his eyes quickly filled with passion and desire. I had seen the look many times before while we were making out, but the atmosphere had never been this charged. Baby, he murmured as I stepped back into his arms and tugged him onto the bed with me, kissing him sensually along the way. I responded by wrapping my legs around his waist, to which he moaned throatily. Baby, you know we can't. I pulled away with a pouty face, the kind I know brings him to his knees. And remind me why we can't. I said, then returned my lips to their station on his neck. Because, I want to, respect. Oh Isabella, I can't think when you're doing that. Good, then don't. Isabella, I looked up at him, feeling the pain of rejection. Why don't you want me this way, Edward? Am I not good enough for you? His gaze softened. Baby, you know that's not what it is. I want you. He paused for dramatic effect. Believe me, I want you bad. Why are you doubting that? Because men are supposed to want sex all the time, and here I am completely willing and you keep turning me down. Maybe she was right, I said, thinking back to Tanya's words to me earlier this afternoon. Edward is a picky man. He only likes the best of the best. She sneered. He shook his head in confusion. She? Who's she? Bella, the only she I'm concerned with right now is you. I looked down weakly, ashamed that I was letting her get to me like this. Tanya made a comment earlier about how you only go for the best of the best. I waited for him to laugh at me. But he never did. I only felt a gentle but firm finger under my chin, guiding my gaze upwards at him. Well, first of all, Tanya knows less about me than Mrs. Cope at school does. Don't ever listen to her. Ever. Can you promise me that? He waited for my answer, and I nodded. Secondly, as much as it pains me to say this, she was right. I felt my eyebrows furrow in pain. And he quickly scrambled to explain himself. I only like the best of the best, and that's why you're the one wrapped in my arms right now. No one else has ever been in this place, Isabella. Only you. My heart melted, and I kissed him gently. So I don't completely repulse you sexually. He laughed. You silly, beautiful woman. I didn't know what sexy was until I met you. The only reason I'm insisting on waiting until we are married is because I want to do right by you. I know it doesn't matter to you, but I could never live with myself if I had treated you badly, even if just by my own standards. I understood. I didn't like it not one bit. And my body didn't either. But I understood. So, you like my outfit then? Baby, it's taking every bit of self-control I never knew I had to not ow you down into these sheets and ravish every part of you senseless. You can't say those things to me if you expect me to wait until marriage, Edward. Fair enough. Can I do this? He asked as he stroked my thigh and his tongue made a toy of my neck. We got so caught up in caresses, kisses, and squeezes that we stopped paying attention to the time. In fact, we paid such horrible attention to we didn't realize anyone was walking into the room until we heard a loud Edward from the doorway. Oops, looks like Tanya's back. Edward froze, completely caught off guard by the sight of our intruder. They said you were gone, Eddie. Why have you been lying to me? For her, Tanya, Edward stuttered, trying to be polite despite his annoyance. I knew he hated being called Eddie, especially by her. But I was sure that he attack on me wouldn't go over well with him. Eddie, have you forgotten what we had? She sauntered over to him, swinging her hips. I supposed she was trying to be seductive with her big pouty face. But to me she just looked trashy. What made her even trashier, however, was when she licked her lips and put her hands on his chest. I saw red. I never thought of myself as a jealous woman. But in that moment the only that thought raced through my mind was mine, mine, mine. I stepped forward. Now you listen here, you little. Bella, darling, I will take care of this. Why don't you go see if your father is busy? Edward sighed, while removing the she-devil's filthy hands from his body. Ha, he thinks I'm actually going to leave him alone with this slut. No way, I'm staking my territory. I responded with a simple HMPH, and Edward knew he wasn't going to win that fight. He smiled at me frustratingly, and I just smirked. Meanwhile, Tanya was faking a panic attack. I can't believe you would allow her to talk to me like that. After everything we've been through, are you just going to drop me? For her, she's nothing, Edward. Look at me. She gestured to herself, and put on the most dramatic pouty face the world has ever seen. Her voice softened. I love you, baby. And I'll forgive you for her, but she has to go. As she finished her soliloquy, she slinkied herself towards him, placing her arms around his neck. My anger multiplied, and I wasn't going to wait any longer for Edward to take care of it. I bounded forward to attack, and was suddenly stopped by two strong arms. Edward, let me go. When there was no response, I struggled and tried again. I mean it, Edward, I won't let her touch you like that. There was again a lack of response, and I turned to find T. Had the vampire holding me back was not Edward after all. Daddy, the compassionate eyes of my father bore into my own. Bella, remember who you are. I know she's taunting you, but Edward loves you. She isn't worth getting into a fight. I raised a brow. This coming from my military father. I always want you to defend yourself, Bella. But only against enemies that will hurt you. Tanya cannot hurt you, because she cannot steal Edward away. He only has eyes for you. Remember that. I looked at the ground, knowing he was right but unwilling to admit it. However, my attention was quickly drawn to my boyfriend and my nemesis. Apparently, Dad's little intervention had given them time to really get into it with each other. Edward looked furious. Look at her, crying to her daddy for help. I'm a grown woman, Eddie. You will not talk about Isabella that way. You are in her home as well as mine, and she will be respected. This isn't her home. She's been here for what, 2 weeks? How can you even trust her? This is her home now. And it will be as long as she'll have me. I cannot say the same for you, and I must ask you to leave. So what? You're just kicking me out because I hurt some little tramp's feelings. For a second, I thought he was going to hit her. I also thought Dad was going to hit her, and I found myself trying to restrain him. Not that I was very effective, but I seemed to be calming him down at least a little. Remember, Daddy, she isn't worth it. The look on Edward's face was murderous. I almost started to think that looks actually could kill, because you know, there's a first for everything and crap. The room was silent, and even the outside noise of crickets seemed to pause to hear what would happen next. After a few deep breaths, and a pinch or two of the bridge of his nose, he responded. Tanya, I am too much of a gentleman to hit a woman. However, if you ever so much as step foot in this house again, I will not hesitate to be so respectful. Her face fell. You have disrespected the love of my life. Our family, and myself. Let me make one thing very, very clear to you. His eyes narrowed inconceivably. I have never loved you, do not love you, and will never love you in the future. Everything I am belongs to that woman over there. My still heart, my debatable soul, and any future I'm blessed to have. I have every intention of loving her forever, and making her my wife, and... He stopped mid-sentence, as if he realized how much he had said. His wife. My breath caught in my throat, and I couldn't decide if what I was hearing was true. What? Tanya screeched, but everyone ignored her. I, in a more breathless and shocked tone, repeated her. What, Edward? I gently ventured over to him. He looked down, embarrassed, then looked into my eyes. I saw all the love in the world shining back on me. All the love I would ever need. Well, I didn't mean for it to come out like that, but it would bring me great pleasure. More than I can express. He leaned down to kiss me tenderly, and I felt myself melt in his arms. Oh, Edward, I smiled, feeling myself want to cry tears that could never be shed. Wait, don't answer yet. I want to do this right. He paused, and in the middle of my bedroom bent to one knee. I had another plan to do this, but maybe this is better. He took my hands in his and continued. Isabella Marie Whitlock, the past 100 years of my existe. NCE have been the darkest anyone has ever known. Then you walk into my life, the strongest woman in the world, and I can suddenly see the brightness that everyone else has been talking about all this time. Not to mention the beautiful gift I never thought I'd be blessed with that you've given me in Whitney, and the unimaginable trust you have in me. It's perhaps the most meaningful thing in the world. Because if you can trust me with her, if you have that much faith in me, then I can do anything. You drive me crazy, and I know there are times you feel the same, but if it's okay with you, I'd like to drive each other crazy forever. Will you marry me? He pulled out a small velvet box from his pocket, and slowly revealed its content to me. I gasped. The ring was gorgeous. There was a brilliant, illuminating opal in the middle surrounded by diamonds large enough to complement it, and small enough not to compete for its attention. I was completely, 100% swept away. I was so absorbed in his beautiful words and beautiful ring that I realized I had almost forgotten to answer. Oh, Edward, of course I'll marry you. You aren't getting rid of me. I chuckled, and brought him up to my level to kiss him fervently. It was passionate and deep, but unrushed and slow. I was suddenly pulled out of my bubble by a loud whistling from the doorway. We broke apart, and turned to find the entire family gathered in the small opening. Alice, a camera in hand, had seemingly captured the entire moment on video while Esme was taking still pictures of our engagement. Emmett, the man responsible for breaking up my almost make-out session with Edward, grinned happily. Congrats you too. He sauntered over to us, and then put on a serious face for Edward. If you ever hurt her, I'll hurt you more. I stifled a laugh at the intensity of his tone. I second that motion, a voice behind me warned. I spun to see Daddy standing behind us, beaming at me with pride and maybe a hint of sadness drifting in his eyes. I went over into his arms immediately. Into a bone-crushing but warm hug. I'm happy for you, baby. I don't think you'll ever be good enough, but I'm glad you're happy. If you ever stop being happy, I have a lot of training on kicking vampire butt. You let me know, he said, while placing a kiss on the top of my head. In that moment, I felt completely at ease. I heard my precious daughter sleeping a room away, and Tanya had quickly fled the property once she realized my new relationship status. While in my father's arms, I thought about the people that filled this room. I had gained so much love from each of them in unique ways. And learned so much from all of them. Strength from Rosalie, compassion from Carlisle, mercy from Esme, optimism from Alice, a home from Daddy, and love from Edward. I shuddered to think of my life before this family had welcomed me into their arms, before knowing my father was alive and well, and before opening up my heart again. As I nuzzled my face into Dad, and heard Alice snap a picture of the father and daughter embrace with my new ring on display, I knew I was home. As I looked into the mirror, I tried not to be overwhelmed with my surroundings and circumstances. Edward, focus on Edward. Ah, Edward. The thought of my handsome groom's face waiting for me at the end of the altar brought me to a state of contentment. Nothing in this world could see. So bad, not even Alice and her wedding day makeover, when I considered the man I was pledging my love to. It had been a long 6 months since our engagement, though Alice would say 6 months was no time at all to plan a wedding. So much had changed, and nothing had been for the worse. Whitney was the size of a preteen now, though only approaching her first birthday in a few months. I still couldn't believe my luck with that one. She had all of Daddy's charm and wit, but even more so his kindness and gentle strength. It had been so much fun to plan a wedding with her, and get her opinions on tea. Such as floral bouquets and cake flavors. One of the most wonderful things to watch Whitney grow into was her relationship with Edward. He oftentimes took her out shopping, or to see movies, or really anything she wanted. He was completely wrapped around her finger, and they both always looked forward to their weekly daddy dates, where I wasn't allowed. It was adorable. I knew there would come a day she would ask me about her biological father, and I only hope that she was secure enough in her relationship with Edward that she doesn't feel cheated out of anything. She certainly has gotten the better end of the bargain, and it did my heart well to see my daughter grow up with a father as amazing as my own. I could faintly remember a time, when I was very young, where I perched on my father's lap as a child on our front porch. No worries about vampires, or pregnancy, or even war. Just my daddy and me. Times were so much simpler. As he rocked us back and forth in the chair, I looked him square in the eye and asked, "Daddy, when am I allowed to get married?" He chuckled at me and answered me with just as much intensity as I meant the conversation to have. "When you meet the right guy, who treats you like the princess you are, and Daddy can make sure he's good enough for you." I groaned in frustration. "But Daddy, when is that gonna be?" "Well, sweetheart, I don't know. I don't know any guy will be good enough for my little princess." I didn't like that answer. I wanted my chance at a happily ever after, just like him and Mama. "I'll probably find him when I'm older, right?" He laughed at me sweetly and ruffled my hair before kissing my cheek. "Yes, sweetheart, when you're older." The irony of our antique conversation was not missed on me. I was indeed older, much older. And Dad's still had problems accepting that any guy was good enough for his little princess. He probably always would. "Bella, stand up so we can put on your dress. We only have 45 minutes until go time." I was pulled out of my inner monologue of sentiments by Alice's frantic urgings. I braced myself to re-enter reality, and stood up to face the long garment bag held before me. We found the dress at a boutique in Seattle on a shopping trip with all the Cullen women. Esme, Alice, and Rosalie all picked beautiful dresses for me to try on, but it was Whitney who actually found the winning dress. It was classically beautiful, with long lace sleeves and a train to match. Lace was the prominent decoration, but I was in love with the simple look of it. It was similar to what I probably would have worn in my human days as a bride. And I cherished the comfort of a distant home. "All right, Alice, let's do this thing." I smiled, and motioned for her to start dressing me. I was careful not to look in the mirror until there was a finished product, because Alice had arranged for a photographer, Rosalie, to capture the "I'm a bride" first look. And, there, turn around, Bella. I didn't need Dad's gift to detect the pride radiating off of Alice in that moment. I took a deep breath, and turned to see my reflection in the mirror. I let out a gasp, completely taken by the stranger looking back at me. I felt more beautiful in that moment than any woman in the world, even Rosalie. The dress fit me perfectly, and was accented by the soft curls framing my face and elegant makeup adorning it. I started to hear the reactions of my bridal entourage: Whitney, Esme, Rosalie, and Alice. Their cooings and whispers of approval tugged on my heartstrings with every word. How far we had come to get to this point. Bella, I turned around to face the voice of the room's newcomer. Daddy stood in the doorway, staring at me with depths of emotions I had never seen before. He cleared his throat and made his way over to me, kissing my hand. "You look stunning." Alice patted him on the back soothingly, and then ushered the girls out of the room so Dad and I could have a private moment. As soon as the door closed, I fell into his arms for a hug that I never wanted to end. He pulled away slightly, to offer me what he had brought into the room. "I came to deliver these." He placed in my hands a dated-looking jewelry box first. "Your mother wore these pearls on our wedding day. They were given to her by your grandmother. It was her wish that you would share in the tradition, and she sent them with me when I left so that I had a reason to come home." As if I needed any more reason. He smiled and stroked my cheek. "I'm sorry it took me so long, but I finally got them to you." I opened the box to reveal a simple and elegant strand of beautiful pearls. Their age undetectable in light of their beauty. "They're beautiful, Dad." "Thank you," I said, with tears filling my eyes that could never be shed. "That's not all." Hen placed a good-sized sewing box in my hands. "Dad, this isn't really the time for me to sew." I smiled, in utter confusion over his gift. He laughed softly and gave me a sad but heartfelt smile. "I've been writing you letters since you were born. Even after I was turned, I kept writing you. The last letter I wrote for you was the day you found your wedding dress." I looked from my father to the box in astonishment. "They aren't all in there, just some of the more tender ones, but I will give you the rest of them after your honeymoon. The one I want you to read today is the first one you'll see when you open that box. I wrote it for you the day you were born, while you were napping. On the envelope it says, 'To Isabella the bride, on her wedding day.'" "Dad, there are several event-oriented letters in that box. But I just wanted you to read that one today." He kissed my head. "I love you, Bella, and you've made me so proud. I'm honored to be walking such a beautiful bride down the aisle today." He looked at me wistfully, and then turned to leave. "No, Daddy, stay." I didn't want to face the emotions the letter would hold all alone. This was a dad moment. He should share it with me. He simply nodded his head in acceptance, and squeezed my hand in support when I opened the letter. "To my Isabella the bride. The 9 months of preparation your mother and I had for you seem so insignificant now as I look at your quiet sleeping form. I'm constantly checking to make sure I still hear the still sound of your breathing, and looking in the bassinet to remind myself that you're really here. I've tried so hard to learn the necessities of fatherhood so I do this right, but your tender life has already thrown me off of caution. No textbook or legacy could have prepared me for the thrill of just looking at your face. Or the fear of failing you. You are so pure, so precious, so innocent. I am already so unworthy of being your father, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to do right by am. Why, little angel, no matter what that entails. Someday, you will grow to be a devastatingly beautiful young woman. And when that time comes, gentlemen callers will present themselves to me to seek your hand. I may not know how to prepare the right meals for you, or sew a wardrobe fit for a queen. But I will, with all of my heart and soul, make sure you are not married to a man unworthy of your love. In truth, there will never be a man good enough to take away my baby girl, but I will not hold you back from any happiness. If you are reading this, that would lead to the conclusion that you have accepted a suitor. You have deemed him worthy, and I must have given my permission for the union. He must be a kind man, with the heart to love you endlessly no matter his circumstances. He must be a stable man, with the capabilities to give you all the things you deserve that I cannot. He must be a brave man, with the courage to protect his wife in the face of all evil in the world. He must do all of these things in great measures for me to have given permission, and for you to love him. You might barely be a day old, but I can already sense your stubborn nature and determined spirit. If I could give you one piece of advice, it would be to always remember all of these wonderful things about the man you love. Trust in the love you share, and pursue a relationship worth fighting for. Don't ever give up, because I wouldn't have given you to a man who would give up on you. I want you to know I will always be your daddy, and you will always be this newborn baby girl to me. You can forever count on me to watch over you. Whether you are married or not. Just as I watch over you now as you take your first slumber, my protection and love will never end. I am so proud to be your father, you beautiful, beautiful girl. I love you, Isabella. Daddy. I looked up and stared at the man who had been pouring himself out to me for so many years, and in his eyes I could see that he was still looking at me and seeing the newborn child he watched over so many years ago. Daddy, I'm still your baby girl. I still need you. That was all it took for him to take me in his arms. Sweetheart, you're ready for this. Edward loves you, and he is a great man. I wouldn't be cooperating this nicely if he weren't. I laughed softly into his shoulder. Remember what I said in the letter, Bella, don't ever give up on him. Remember why you fell in love with him, and you will have a happy marriage. He paused, and stroked my hair a little before pulling back to look me in the eyes. Do you recall when you were little? And asked me when you were allowed to get married? I smiled, in shock of how similarly our brains worked. I was just thinking about that before you came in. You told me I could get married when I was older. Well, sweetheart, you're older, and it doesn't make it any easier for me, but I know you're ready for this. We were interrupted by a gentle knock at the door. Whitney opened the door slightly and peeked her head in. Mom, I don't mean to interrupt, but we're ready. Daddy looks real handsome, she said happily. You saw him, he came back and saw me. He gave me a letter for me and a note for you. She proudly extended her hand to offer me the note from my groom. I opened the small piece of paper to reveal a simple message. Last chance to get cold feet, if not, I'll see you at the end of the altar. I giggled at his joke, grateful that he and I had already exchanged wedding morning letters earlier while getting ready. All right, sweetie, we're ready, I told my daughter, then turned to Dad. Are you ready? While Daddy was still going to be walking me down the aisle, Whitney was going to escort me on my other side. I wanted this wedding to be a symbol of the three of us coming together as a family, not just two people as a couple. While Whitney took my hand and led me towards the top of the staircase, Dad slowly took my other and kissed me on the cheek before grinning. I'm ready, baby. You're older. And with that, we took our first steps to the wedding march towards the few waiting guests, family, and Edward. Towards my future.